The rain in
You
Seattle
clumsy
didn't just
idiot.
fall.
Look what you've
It
done to my
hammered
suit.
against the city
This is
like judgment
unacceptable.
itself, relentless and cold, turning the November
I believe
streets
this
into
belongs to
rivers of
me.
regret. In a studio
was left for
apartment
me.
that smelled of mildew and medicine, Sarah Carter woke at 4:30 in the morning to the sound of her own lungs betraying her. 62 years old, a lifetime of service reduced to a body that could no longer draw breath without pain. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake Emma sleeping in the next room. The coughing started immediately, deep, wrenching spasms that turned her face purple. She pressed a faded pillowcase to her lips, watching dim light filter through the cracked window. The bucket in the corner caught drops from the ceiling, plink, 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 like a clock counting down. On the nightstand beside her bed sat 3 photographs that told her story. A young nurse in pristine scrubs standing outside Harborview Medical Center. A wedding photo, her husband David's arm around her waist, both laughing. And the most recent addition, an eviction notice, pink as a valentine, bold black letters across the top. 72 hours, that's all they had left. Sarah looked at the wedding photo, her finger tracing the outline of David's face through the dusty glass. 15 years gone now. Killed instantly when a drunk driver ran a red light on Pike Street. The insurance barely covered the funeral. The medical bills from the accident, the ones that came after, those had swallowed everything else. The house, the car, the savings account they'd built penny by penny for Emma's college fund. She had been a nurse once, a good one. She could start an IV on a junkie with collapsed veins, could talk a suicidal teenager down from a ledge, could hold the hand of a dying man and make him believe, just for a moment, that death wasn't the end of everything. But chronic obstructive pulmonary disease doesn't care about your resume. COPD doesn't care that you spent 3 decades helping others breathe. It takes your lungs anyway. It takes everything. The coughing subsided. Sarah wiped her mouth and looked at the closed door between her room and the main living space. Behind that door, Emma was curled up on a couch that sagged in the middle, probably still in her waitress uniform because she'd been too exhausted to change. Working double shifts, coming home smelling like grease and disappointment. 28 years old and already carrying the weight of 2 lifetimes. Sarah remembered the day Emma had come home from Seattle University, 3 years into her social work degree, her eyes red from crying. She'd found Sarah unconscious on the bathroom floor, the ambulance already on its way, called by a neighbor who'd heard the fall. Emma had dropped out the next week. No discussion, no debate, just a quiet determination that still broke Sarah's heart when she thought about it. "I can go back to school later," Emma had said, packing up her textbooks, her hands shaking. "You're more important, Mom." And Sarah, weak and defeated in a hospital bed, had wanted to scream. Wanted to tell her daughter to run, to escape, to live the life she deserved. But she'd been too tired, too sick, too selfish. So she just nodded and let Emma throw away her future. Now sitting in the pre-dawn darkness, Sarah made a decision. She looked at the eviction notice again, then at the pill bottles lined up on her nightstand. 7 different medications. $800 a month, even with the charity assistance from some foundation whose name she could never remember. The Westbrook Legacy Foundation, something like that. She thought about the nursing home brochures she'd hidden in her dresser drawer, places with names like Sunset Gardens and Peaceful Pines, as if calling them something pretty would make them less terrible. Medicaid would cover it. Emma could keep the apartment, small as it was. Could maybe even go back to school. Sarah picked up the eviction notice and held it up to the weak light. 72 hours. Maybe this was the sign she'd been waiting for. Maybe this was God telling her it was time to stop being a burden. She heard movement from the other room. Emma was awake. Sarah quickly wiped her eyes, smoothed down her thin gray hair, and tried to arrange her face into something that looked less like defeat. The door opened. Emma stood there in her wrinkled uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had mostly fallen apart, her face creased with worry lines that no 28-year-old should have. "Mom," Emma said, and her voice was so gentle it made Sarah want to weep. "I heard you coughing. Do you need your inhaler?" "I'm fine, sweetheart." "You're not fine." Emma crossed the small room, her movements efficient and practiced. She'd become a caretaker without ever meaning to, without ever training for it. She grabbed the inhaler, shook it, held it to Sarah's lips. Breathe in, slowly. Sarah obeyed. The medication hit her lungs, opening passages that had been fighting to close. For a moment, she could breathe almost normally. Better? Emma asked. Sarah nodded. She watched her daughter's face, seeing the exhaustion there, the fear poorly hidden behind a forced smile. Emma's eyes drifted to the nightstand, to the eviction notice neither of them had talked about yet. Mom, Emma said quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed. We need to talk about this. I know. I can get the money. I just need one good shift. Maybe a big party at the restaurant. Maybe someone who tips well. Emma's voice was steady, but Sarah could hear the desperation underneath. I've been working there a year. Crawford knows I'm good. He'll give me the VIP tables eventually. Emma, sweetheart. Sarah took her daughter's hand. It was rough from work, the nails bitten short. You don't have to do this. I can go to Sunset Gardens. They have a bed available. Medicaid will cover it. Emma's face hardened. No. It's not a bad place. I looked at the brochures. They have activities. A garden. I said no, Mom. Emma's grip tightened. You spent 30 years taking care of other people. You spent the last 15 years taking care of me by yourself after Dad died. You sold everything. You worked 2 jobs so I could go to college. You think I'm going to put you in some facility where you'll be alone? Where they'll forget your name and leave you sitting in front of a TV all day? You have your own life to live. You are my life. Emma's voice cracked. You taught me that, remember? You taught me that family matters more than anything, that taking care of the people you love isn't a burden, it's a privilege. Were you lying? Sarah felt tears rolling down her cheeks. No, I wasn't lying. Then stop trying to martyr yourself. Emma stood up, wiping her own eyes angrily. I'm going to work. I'm going to get good tips. We're going to pay this rent, and you're going to stay here with me where you belong. Understand? Sarah could only nod. Emma leaned down and kissed her forehead, the way Sarah used to kiss Emma's forehead when she was a little girl afraid of the dark. Then she grabbed her worn coat from the hook by the door and stepped out into the rain. Sarah sat alone in the silence that followed. She looked at the eviction notice again, then at the photograph of herself as a young nurse, full of dreams and possibility. Somewhere between that photograph and this moment, life had happened. Love, loss, sacrifice, the kind of quiet heroism that nobody writes stories about because it happens in the dark, in small apartments in the space between breaths. She picked up the wedding photo and held it close. David, she whispered to the ghost of her husband, I tried to do right by her. I really tried. The rain kept falling, the bucket kept catching drops, and Sarah Carter closed her eyes and prayed for a miracle she didn't believe would come. Across town, in a kitchen that smelled of industrial bleach and burnt coffee, Emma Carter tied her apron and tried not to think about the numbers that wouldn't add up no matter how many times she recalculated them in her head. $2,400, 72 hours, $800 in her savings account, $1,600 short of survival. The Sterling Hall kitchen was a cathedral of stainless steel and harsh fluorescent lighting, a place where food was transformed into art for people who could afford $50 appetizers. Emma had been working there for 13 months, long enough to know which line cooks would cover for you if you were running late, which servers would steal your tips if you turned your back, and which customers would send back a perfectly good steak just to watch you grovel. She clocked in at 5:47 in the morning, 13 minutes late, because the number 7 bus had been delayed by flooding on 4th Avenue. Mr. Crawford, the floor manager, stood by the time clock with his arms crossed, his thin face pinched into an expression of perpetual disappointment. You're late, Carter. I'm sorry, Mr. Crawford, the bus was delayed. The bus is always delayed for you, isn't it? He looked her up and down with the kind of disdain that made Emma feel like something stuck to his shoe. 3rd time this month. It won't happen again. It better not. We have standards here. This isn't some diner where you can just show up whenever you feel like it. He consulted his clipboard. You've got the prep station today. Santos needs help with the vegetables. Emma nodded and headed toward the prep area, where Rita Chen was already elbow-deep in a sink full of potatoes. Rita was 62 years old with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, and hands that moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this work for longer than Emma had been alive. She looked up when Emma approached and gave her a small, knowing smile. Late again? Rita asked. Bus. Rita didn't press. She never did. That was one of the things Emma loved about her. Rita understood that sometimes you were late because life was hard, and explanations didn't make anything better. Well, grab a peeler. We've got 40 pounds of Yukon Golds that need to be ready by service. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of peeling and chopping providing a meditation of sorts. Emma had learned early on that Rita didn't fill space with meaningless chatter. When Rita spoke, it mattered. After about 20 minutes, Rita paused and looked at Emma with sharp eyes. "You okay, kid?" Emma kept peeling. "I'm fine." "You look like you're about to fall over." "Just tired." Rita set down her knife. "Emma, I know tired. This is something else. What's going on?" Emma felt her throat tighten. "It's nothing, just some bills." Rita was quiet for a moment. "How much do you need?" "Rita, I can't." "How much?" 2,400, but it's fine. I'll get good tips." Rita let out a bitter laugh. "Crawford give you a VIP table? I've been here 25 years and he still treats me like I'm lucky to work lunch shift." The words stung because they were true. Emma had watched other servers get the high roller tables for over a year. "Then I'll work doubles. I'll make it work." Rita studied her, then did something unexpected. She pulled Emma close in a hug. "You're a good kid. Too good for this place." She pulled back. "Listen, I've learned in 62 years that people like us are invisible. We serve the food, clean the floors, and nobody sees us. They look right through us like we're ghosts." "Rita." "But you know what? We're the ones holding everything together. We matter. Don't forget that." Emma felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "I won't." "Good." Rita released her and picked up her knife again. "Now finish those potatoes. And tonight, when Crawford inevitably gives the VIP table to some 22-year-old with perfect teeth, you hold your head up. You're worth 10 of those girls and don't you forget it." They worked in silence after that. But it was a different kind of silence. A solidarity. A shared understanding of what it meant to be seen as less than. To fight for dignity in a world that wanted to strip it away. At 2 in the afternoon, Crawford called Emma into his office. It was a small, cramped space that smelled like cigarettes, even though smoking in restaurants had been illegal for years. He sat behind his desk, looking at his computer screen, not bothering to make eye contact. "Carter, I have you down for table service tonight." Emma's heart jumped. "Really?" "Don't get excited. You're on the regular floor, but I'm going to need you to be sharp. We have a VIP reservation, very important client, and I need every server on point." "I understand." "Do you?" Crawford finally looked at her. "Because I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. This client could make or break this restaurant. He's that important. So if you screw up, if you're late, if you so much as put a fork in the wrong place, I will personally make sure you never work in a decent restaurant in this city again. Do we understand each other?" Emma nodded, swallowing her anger. "Yes, sir." "Good, now we'll get out and tell Chen I need her." Emma found Rita finishing the last of the prep work. "Crawford wants to see you." Rita's face fell. She set down her knife and wiped her hands, her movements suddenly slower, more careful. "Did he say why?" "No." Rita nodded and headed toward the office. Emma watched her go, a knot of worry forming in her stomach. 10 minutes later, Rita emerged, her face carefully blank. "What did he want?" Emma asked. Rita didn't answer at first. She just stood there, staring at nothing. Then she said, "He's giving you the VIP table tonight." Emma blinked. "What?" "Table 1, the private alcove. Harrison Westbrook and his guests." "But you always do the VIP tables. You've been here 25 years. "I know." Rita's voice was flat. "Crawford says he wants a younger face for this particular client. Says Mr. Westbrook will prefer someone—" She trailed off. "Someone what?" Rita finally looked at Emma, and the pain in her eyes was almost unbearable. "Someone younger, prettier, less old." The words hung in the air between them like poison. Emma felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. "That's not fair. You're the best server here. You know more about fine dining than Crawford will ever know. This is discrimination." "This is life, sweetheart." Rita pulled off her apron. "I'm going to take my break. You should start getting ready for your shift. You're going to need it." She walked away before Emma could respond. Emma stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the sounds of preparation, the sizzle of pans and the shouts of line cooks, and she understood something fundamental about the world. Rita had been right. They were invisible. And the moment you stop being young, the moment you stop being beautiful, the moment you stop fitting into the narrow definition of what the world wanted, you became even more invisible. She thought about her mother, 62 years old with failing lungs and a lifetime of service to others, sitting in that small apartment staring at an eviction notice. She thought about Rita, who had spent a quarter-century perfecting her craft only to be told she was too old to serve rich people their dinner. And she thought about herself, 28 years old and already feeling like time was running out, like the world was closing doors faster than she could open them. But she also thought about the number on that eviction notice: $2,400, one good table, one generous tip, a chance to keep her mother in that apartment for another month. She tied her apron tighter and got ready for the dinner shift. Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking Puget Sound, Harrison Westbrook sat in a leather chair and watched the rain turn the world gray. 74 years old, $6 billion, 4 months to live. The cancer in his pancreas had spread everywhere that mattered. The doctors had offered chemotherapy. Harrison declined. He'd watched his wife Margaret die slowly over 18 months of treatment that brought nothing but pain. He wouldn't do that to himself. The penthouse was silent except for rain against the windows. Empty rooms, expensive furniture nobody used, art worth millions, all meaningless, all cold. He picked up the photograph beside him. Margaret on their wedding day, 45 years ago. Dead 10 years now. Next to it, another photo, smaller, more painful. Jonathan, his son, dead 5 years, not from cancer, from despair. Harrison remembered their last fight, about the business, about succession, about Jonathan's inability to live up to the Westbrook name. Harrison had been cruel. 2 days later, Jonathan jumped from the Westbrook Maritime building. In Jonathan's apartment, Harrison found a journal. The last entry said, "Dad will finally be free of the disappointment I've become." Harrison had built an empire, made billions, lost everyone he loved. Now, dying slowly, he understood something fundamental. The money meant nothing. It couldn't bring Margaret back, couldn't undo his words to Jonathan, couldn't buy more time. The door opened. Thomas Gray, his assistant for 35 years, entered quietly. "Sir, Dr. Morrison is here." Harrison nodded. "Send her in." Grace Morrison entered the room with the no-nonsense efficiency that had made her one of the top oncologists on the West Coast. She was 58 years old, tall and slim with short gray hair she'd stopped dyeing years ago. She'd been Margaret's doctor. She'd held Margaret's hand when she died. And she'd been honest enough with Harrison to tell him that his presence in the hospital room was making his wife's last days harder, not easier. That honesty had earned Harrison's respect. Grace was one of the few people who would tell him the truth, even when it hurt. "Grace," Harrison said, "thank you for coming." "You know I'm always available for you, Harrison." She sat in the chair across from him and pulled out a tablet. "I have your latest test results." "I don't want to hear the numbers." "You need to hear them. I need to know one thing. How long?" Grace sighed. 4 months, maybe 5. The tumors are growing faster than we anticipated. The pain will get worse. Soon you'll need morphine around the clock. And eventually I'll die." Harrison finished the sentence for her. "I know. I'm ready. Are you?" Grace set down the tablet and looked at him with those sharp, assessing eyes. "Because the Harrison Westbrook I've known for 30 years doesn't seem like the type to go gentle into that good night. I'm tired, Grace. Tired of fighting. Tired of being alone. Tired of waking up every morning and remembering that everyone I've ever loved is gone, because I was too focused on building my empire to actually be present in their lives." "That's the cancer talking." "No, that's the truth talking." Harrison picked up the photograph of Jonathan. "I had a son. I drove him to suicide because I valued my company more than his happiness. What kind of man does that make me?" Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "A flawed one, like all of us. But Harrison, you still have time. Time to make amends. Time to do something meaningful with what's left of your life." "Like what? I can't bring back my wife. I can't bring back my son. The damage is done." "Then do something for someone else. You have resources. Use them." Harrison looked out at the rain. He thought about the board meeting he'd attended last week, where his nephew Brandon had presented a plan to merge with Horizon Logistics. A plan that would make the shareholders billions, but put 3,000 workers out of jobs. Brandon had been excited, enthusiastic, reminding Harrison of himself at that age, hungry and ruthless and completely devoid of empathy. The board had loved it. They'd called it innovative, strategic, a bold move for the future of the company. Harrison had sat there listening and felt nothing but disgust. Not at them, at himself, because he'd created this. He'd built a culture that valued profit over people. And now his nephew was following in his footsteps, ready to destroy lives without a second thought. "I'm hosting a dinner tonight," Harrison said suddenly. Grace raised an eyebrow. "A dinner?" "At the Sterling Hall. I've invited Brandon, my stepdaughter Vanessa, and Richard Sterling from the board. I'm going to tell them about the succession plan." "Are you going to sign over the company to Brandon?" "I don't know." Harrison pulled a small silver pocket watch from his vest. It was tarnished and old, covered in scratches. Margaret had given it to him on their wedding day. He'd carried it every day since. "I want to test them first." "Test them how?" Harrison opened the watch. Inside, where the clockwork should have been, was a tiny circuit board with a blinking red light. A recording device, state-of-the-art, connected via Bluetooth to a receiver in Thomas's pocket and Harrison's hearing aid. "I'm going to see what kind of people they really are when they think I'm not listening," Harrison said. "And then I'm going to decide if any of them deserve what I've built." Grace stared at the device. "That's ruthless? Manipulative? Welcome to my world, Grace. I built this empire by knowing what people really thought when their guard was down. Why should my family be any different?" "Because they're your family." "Are they?" Harrison closed the watch with a sharp click. "Brandon sees me as a meal ticket. Vanessa sees me as an ATM. Richard sees me as an obstacle to his own ambitions. None of them see me as a person. None of them ever have. And what if they fail your test? Then I'll give everything to charity. Or burn it all. I don't care anymore." Harrison stood, the movement sending a spike of pain through his spine. He ignored it. "I just want to know if there's one person left in my circle who values integrity over money. One person who would do the right thing when it costs them everything." Grace stood as well. "You're looking for someone who doesn't exist, Harrison. Not in your world. Maybe, but I have to know. Before I die, I have to know if I completely failed as a human being, or if there's even the smallest chance that goodness still exists somewhere." She studied him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Call me if you need anything, and Harrison, whatever happens tonight, remember that you still have the power to change things. It's not too late." After Grace left, Harrison sat alone with his thoughts. He looked at the photographs of Margaret and Jonathan. He looked at the pocket watch with its hidden recording device. And he thought about the dinner that would begin in just a few hours. The dinner that would determine how he spent his final months. Whether he would die knowing he'd created something good, or whether he would take his last breath surrounded by people who only loved his money. He pressed the button on the watch, activating the recording device. A soft beep confirmed it was working. Then he called Thomas. "Make sure everything is ready at the restaurant," Harrison said. "And Thomas, tonight might get ugly. Be prepared for anything." "Always, sir," Thomas replied. Harrison looked out at the rain one last time. Somewhere in this city, people were struggling. People were making hard choices. People were choosing between rent and medicine, between dignity and survival. He'd spent his whole life above all that, insulated by wealth, protected from the harsh realities that broke ordinary people. But tonight, for just a few hours, he was going to step into that world. He was going to see what people were really made of. And if he was lucky, if God hadn't completely abandoned him, maybe he would find one person who would restore his faith in humanity before it was too late. The rain kept falling, the city kept moving, and Harrison Westbrook prepared for the last test he would ever give. The Sterling Hall sat on the corner of First Avenue and Madison Street, like a monument to wealth and exclusivity. It was the kind of restaurant that didn't advertise, didn't need to. If you had to ask how much dinner cost, you couldn't afford to eat there. The dining room held only 30 tables, each one positioned to provide maximum privacy and minimum awareness of the other guests. The lighting was low, golden, designed to make everyone look younger and richer and more important than they actually were. Emma arrived through the back entrance at 5:30, shaking rain from her cheap coat. Her heart was pounding. Table 1. The private alcove reserved for visiting dignitaries, tech moguls, politicians who needed to make deals away from prying eyes. In 13 months of working here, she'd never been within 10 feet of Table 1. She changed into her service uniform in the staff locker room, her hands trembling. The uniform hung awkwardly on her frame, but it was clean and pressed. Rita was already on the floor setting up her station. She looked up when Emma emerged and gave her a small, sad smile that said everything words couldn't. Emma wanted to apologize for taking her table, but Crawford was watching from the bar, his sharp eyes tracking every movement. "Carter," Crawford barked, "come here." Emma approached, wiping her damp palms on her apron. Crawford looked her up and down with the critical eye of a drill sergeant inspecting a new recruit. "You know who Harrison Westbrook is?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Everyone in Seattle knows who he is." "Then you understand that this is not just any table. This is the table. The man is worth $6 billion. He owns 60% of this restaurant. He could buy and sell all of us without thinking twice about it." Crawford leaned in closer, his breath smelling of coffee and cigarettes. "So I'm going to tell you exactly how this is going to work, and you're going to listen very carefully." Emma nodded. "You will pour the wine. You will serve the food. You will clear the plates. You will do this quickly, quietly, and perfectly. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not make eye contact for longer than necessary. You will not drop anything, spill anything, or breathe too loudly. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. If Mr. Westbrook or any of his guests need something, you anticipate it before they ask. If they want their water refilled, you see the glass getting low and you refill it. If they want their bread plate replaced, you replace it. You are invisible and indispensable at the same time. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." Crawford studied her for a moment longer. "I'm taking a risk on you, Carter. Don't make me regret it. If you screw this up, you're done here. And I'll make sure every restaurant in this city knows why." The threat hung in the air between them like a blade. Emma swallowed hard and nodded again. Crawford dismissed her with a wave of his hand. She went to the service station and began checking her supplies. Water pitcher, wine glasses, bread basket. Everything had to be perfect. Her hands were still shaking. She pressed them flat against the counter and took a deep breath, trying to calm the panic rising in her chest. A hand touched her shoulder. She turned to find Rita standing there, her face full of concern. "You okay?" Rita asked quietly. "I'm terrified." "Good. That means you'll be careful." Rita squeezed her shoulder. "Listen to me. I know this feels like a lot of pressure, but you're good at this. Better than you think. Just remember what I taught you. Watch their faces. Anticipate their needs. And most importantly, remember that they're just people. Rich people, yes. Powerful people, yes. But still just people who need to eat dinner. What if I mess up? You won't. But if you do, you handle it with grace. You apologize. You fix it. You move on. That's all any of us can do." Rita glanced toward Crawford, who was still watching them from across the room. "He shouldn't have taken this table from me. That was wrong. But I'm not angry at you. You didn't ask for this. You're just trying to survive, same as the rest of us." Emma felt tears threatening. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just make me proud out there." Rita smiled. "And who knows? Maybe this Harrison Westbrook will turn out to be different from the usual assholes we serve. Maybe he'll actually see you as a person instead of a servant." "You think so?" Rita's smile faded slightly. "No, but hope is free, kiddo. Might as well hold on to it while you can." At 7 o'clock, the first guest arrived. Brandon Westbrook swept into the restaurant like he owned it, which, technically, through his uncle's holdings, he partially did. He was 35 years old, with the kind of looks that came from expensive haircuts and personal trainers, and a lifetime of never being told no. His suit probably cost more than Emma made in 6 months. His watch, a Patek Philippe that glinted under the lights, could have paid her rent for 5 years. He didn't acknowledge Emma when she approached to take his coat, didn't look at her face, just thrust the wet overcoat at her like she was a piece of furniture, designed solely for the purpose of holding his belongings. His eyes were glued to his phone, scrolling through something that made him smile in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Sparkling water," he said without looking up. "And make sure it's cold. Not room temperature like the swill they served last time." "Of course, sir," Emma said quietly. He waved her away and sat down at table 1, immediately pulling out his phone again. Emma hung his coat and went to get his water, her heart sinking. This was going to be a long night. The second guest arrived 10 minutes later. Vanessa Hart moved through the restaurant like a movie star on a red carpet, turning heads without even trying. She was 42 years old and beautiful in a way that took work. The kind of beauty that required standing appointments with dermatologists and hairstylists and personal shoppers. Her red Versace dress probably cost more than Emma's car used to be worth before it broke down for good. But when Emma approached to greet her, she noticed something the dress and makeup couldn't quite hide. Vanessa's hands were shaking slightly. Her eyes, beneath the carefully applied mascara and eyeshadow, looked tired, sad, like someone who'd spent a long time pretending to be happy and was starting to forget what the real thing felt like. "Welcome to the Sterling Hall," Emma said. "May I take your coat?" Vanessa looked at her then, really looked at her. And for just a second, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. Two women standing on opposite sides of an invisible line drawn by money and circumstance. "Thank you," Vanessa said, and her voice was softer than Emma expected. She slipped off her coat, revealing arms that were too thin, the bones visible beneath expensive skin. "I'll bring you a drink menu," Emma offered. "Vodka martini, Grey Goose, 3 olives, and if the olives are small, send it back." The moment passed. Vanessa sat down next to Brandon, who grunted something that might have been a greeting, and Emma went to get the martini. The third guest was Richard Sterling, the CFO of Westbrook Maritime, a man who looked like he'd been constructed entirely out of stress and high blood pressure. He was 55 years old, balding, sweating despite the cool temperature in the dining room. He carried a leather briefcase that he clutched like a life preserver. He barely glanced at Emma when she greeted him, just thrust a card at her and said, "Scotch, neat, top shelf, and tell the sommelier I'll want to see the wine list for dinner." "Yes, sir." The three of them sat at table 1, creating a triangle of tension that Emma could feel from across the room. Brandon on his phone, Vanessa studying her reflection in a butter knife, Richard pulling papers from his briefcase, spreading them across the table like he was preparing for battle. They didn't talk to each other, didn't acknowledge one another. 3 people who were supposedly family, sitting close enough to touch, and yet completely alone. Emma delivered their drinks and retreated to her station, watching, waiting. Crawford had positioned himself near the entrance, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Whatever was about to happen, everyone seemed to know it was important. Everyone except Emma. At 7:30 exactly, the door opened. Harrison Westbrook entered the Sterling Hall with the slow, measured steps of a man who knew death was following. He looked smaller than Emma had imagined, frailer. The expensive suit hung on his frame, but his eyes were still sharp, still aware, still missing nothing. Thomas Gray walked beside him, one hand hovering near Harrison's elbow. They crossed the dining room in silence, every head turning to watch. Brandon stood when his uncle approached, a practiced smile on his face. "Uncle Harrison, you're looking well." It was such an obvious lie that Emma almost laughed. Harrison looked like a strong wind could knock him over. "Brandon," Harrison said, his voice surprisingly strong despite his appearance. "Still lying, I see. Some things never change." Vanessa stood as well, more gracefully, and kissed Harrison's cheek. "Hello, father." "Vanessa, still beautiful, still alone. Tell me, how is husband number 3 working out?" Vanessa's smile tightened. "I'm between marriages at the moment. I'm sure number 3 is right around the corner." Richard didn't stand, just nodded from his position behind the fortress of paperwork. "Harrison, thank you for agreeing to meet. We have a lot to discuss." "I'm sure we do." Harrison lowered himself into his chair slowly, every movement clearly causing pain. He pulled a small silver pocket watch from his vest and placed it on the table carefully, the tarnished metal looking out of place among the fine china and crystal. Emma approached with her water pitcher. "Good evening, Mr. Westbrook. Welcome to the Sterling Hall. My name is Emma, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. Can I get you something to drink?" Harrison looked up at her, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. There was something in his eyes, not just pain, not just exhaustion, something deeper, a searching quality, like he was looking for something he'd lost and wasn't sure he'd ever find again. "Just hot water, please," he said quietly. "With lemon if you have it." "Hot water?" Vanessa laughed, a brittle sound. "Father, don't be dramatic. Have a scotch. Celebrate. We're about to make history." "My stomach isn't what it used to be," Harrison murmured, still watching Emma. She felt pinned by his gaze, seen in a way she hadn't been seen in a long time. It was unsettling and comforting at the same time. "Is there anything else I can get you to make you comfortable, sir?" she asked. Harrison's expression softened slightly. You've already done that just by asking. Thank you, my dear. Don't coddle him, Brandon snapped, finally looking up from his phone. He's fine. He's just playing up the frail old man act to guilt trip us during negotiations. I know your game, Uncle Harrison. Harrison didn't respond. He just watched Emma as she poured water for the others, his hand resting on the pocket watch like it was an anchor keeping him tethered to the world. Emma felt Crawford's eyes on her from across the room. She worked quickly, efficiently, trying to be invisible the way he'd told her to be. But Harrison kept watching her, and it made being invisible impossible. When she finished and stepped back, Harrison spoke again, his voice carrying across the table with surprising strength. Before we begin, he said, I want to make something clear to all of you. Brandon set down his phone. Vanessa stopped checking her reflection. Richard looked up from his papers. They all turned toward Harrison with the kind of attention that came from knowing money was about to be discussed. I'm dying, Harrison said simply. Vanessa gasped. Father, don't say that. It's true. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I have about 4 months left, maybe less if I'm unlucky. So this dinner, this meeting, it's not about quarterly projections or merger strategies. It's about something more important. He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze sharp and assessing. It's about character. Richard frowned. Character? Harrison, we have billions of dollars at stake here. The Horizon merger alone. I don't care about the merger. Harrison cut him off. I don't care about the stock price or the quarterly earnings or any of it. I care about knowing who I'm leaving my legacy to. I care about knowing if any of you deserve what I've built. Brandon leaned forward. What are you saying? Harrison picked up the pocket watch and held it up to the light. The tarnished silver caught the glow from the candles, making it shimmer. I'm saying that tonight is a test, not of your business acumen, not of your financial savvy, a test of who you really are when you think no one important is watching. He set the watch back down with a soft click. I've spent my entire life building an empire. I've made billions. I've crushed competitors and dominated markets and done things I'm not proud of in the name of success. And you know what I learned? Money doesn't mean anything if you don't have someone worth leaving it to. Vanessa reached across the table, her hand trembling. Father, you're leaving it to us. We're your family. Are you? Harrison's voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a knife. When was the last time any of you visited me because you wanted to, not because you needed something? When was the last time you called just to talk? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of a bank account with a pulse? Silence fell over the table. Emma stood at her station, frozen, not sure if she should leave or stay. This felt private, intimate, like something she shouldn't be witnessing. But Harrison turned to look at her, and something in his expression told her to stay. The test has already begun, Harrison said quietly, still looking at Emma. And by the end of this evening, I will know which of you, if any, has the character to inherit what I've built. The person who passes will receive everything. The person who fails will receive nothing. Brandon's face flushed red. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. Richard started gathering his papers. This is insane. Harrison, you're clearly not in your right mind. We should postpone this dinner until you've had a chance to… To what? To die? To change my mind? Harrison leaned back in his chair, a slight smile on his lips. No, Richard, this dinner happens tonight, and by the time dessert is served, you'll all know exactly where you stand. He glanced at Emma one more time, then at the pocket watch sitting innocently on the table. Let's eat, shall we? I believe I ordered the lobster bisque to start. Emma moved forward on shaking legs to take their orders, but her mind was reeling. A test. He'd said it was a test, but a test of what? And how would he judge them? And why did she have the terrible sinking feeling that she was somehow part of whatever game he was playing? She took their orders mechanically, barely hearing their words. Brandon wanted the filet. Vanessa ordered the duck breast, then changed her mind to the fish, then back to the duck. Richard didn't even look at the menu, just waved his hand and said to bring him whatever the chef recommended. Harrison ordered nothing, just the soup and the hot water and lemon Emma had already brought. As she turned to leave, she heard Harrison say one more thing, so quietly she almost missed it. The truth always comes out, he murmured, especially when people think no one's listening. His hand rested on his pocket watch, and Emma, who knew nothing about hidden recording devices or tests of character, or the ways powerful men manipulated the world around them, felt a chill run down her spine. Something was about to happen. something that would change everything. She just didn't know yet that she would be at the center of it all. The kitchen at the Sterling Hall existed in a state of controlled chaos. Fire roared beneath copper pots. Knives moved in rhythmic percussion against cutting boards. Steam rose in clouds from simmering stocks, while line cooks barked orders in a language of abbreviations and urgency that only they understood. And in the midst of it all, Emma stood at the prep station, with her hands wrapped around a silver tureen filled with lobster bisque that cost more per serving than she made in a day. The soup was the color of sunset. Orange and pink swirled together in patterns that caught the harsh kitchen light and transformed it into something almost beautiful. The aroma rose in waves, saffron and cream, sherry and shellfish, the kind of luxury that people like Emma only experienced from the wrong side of a serving counter. Rita appeared at her elbow, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd spent 25 years navigating restaurant kitchens. Her silver hair was coming loose from its bun. Small beads of sweat dotted her forehead. She'd been working double time, covering both her own tables and helping wherever she could, trying to prove she still had value, despite being told she was too old for the VIP service. "You ready for this?" Rita asked, her voice low enough that only Emma could hear. Emma tightened her grip on the tureen handles. "I think so." "Don't think." "No. That soup is hot, hotter than you expect. If you're not careful, if you hesitate even for a second, it'll burn right through skin." Rita placed a steadying hand on Emma's shoulder. "I've seen it happen. 25 years ago, I dropped a tureen of French onion soup. Third-degree burns on my hands. Crawford made me finish my shift before I could go to the emergency room." Emma looked at her friend's hands. Even after all these years, faint scars remained, shiny patches of skin that had healed wrong. Rita caught her looking and smiled, but there was no humor in it. Men like Crawford, men like the ones sitting at that table out there, they don't see us as people. We're tools, useful until we break, then disposable. Rita's grip tightened. "But you know what? That doesn't mean we have to see ourselves that way. You go out there and you serve that soup with your head up. You're not less than them, you're just in different circumstances." Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She lifted the tureen, feeling its weight settle into her arms. Heavy, precarious. One wrong move and everything could go terribly wrong. She pushed through the swinging kitchen doors and entered the dining room. The temperature dropped immediately. The chaos of the kitchen gave way to manufactured calm. Soft piano music played from hidden speakers. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths. The wealthy sat at their tables, insulated from the real world by money and arrogance, and the invisible labor of people they'd never bothered to notice. Table 1 sat in its private alcove, partially hidden from the main dining room by frosted glass panels. Emma could see the silhouettes of Harrison and his guests, could hear the murmur of conversation, though she couldn't make out the words. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she approached. At the table, the tension was thick enough to taste. Brandon had his phone face down now, his attention focused on the folder of documents that Richard had spread across the tablecloth. Vanessa sat with her hands folded in her lap, her untouched martini sweating condensation onto the linen. And Harrison sat at the head of the table, one hand resting on that strange silver pocket watch, his eyes distant and unreadable. They didn't acknowledge Emma when she approached, didn't look up, didn't pause their conversation. She might as well have been a ghost. "The merger makes perfect sense," Richard was saying, his finger jabbing at a spreadsheet. "Horizon Logistics has the infrastructure we need in Southeast Asia. We acquire them, consolidate operations, eliminate redundancies. Stock price jumps 20% minimum." "Redundancies," Harrison repeated softly. "Is that what we're calling people now?" "I'm calling inefficiency what it is. 3,000 overlapping positions, mostly warehouse workers and dock laborers, low skill, easily replaceable." "Easily replaceable," Harrison echoed. He looked up then, his eyes finding Emma. For just a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. Then his gaze dropped back to the table. Emma began serving. Ladies first, as she'd been taught. She moved to Vanessa, her hand steady despite the tremor in her chest. The ladle dipped into the bisque, the first serving poured smooth and clean into the bowl. No splashes, no drips. Vanessa didn't acknowledge the service. She was staring at something across the room, or maybe at nothing at all. Her beautiful face looked tired beneath the makeup, sad in a way that expensive dresses couldn't hide. Emma noticed her hands were shaking slightly where they rested in her lap. "Vanessa," Brandon said sharply, "are you even listening?" "Of course." Vanessa's voice was flat. "You're talking about destroying 3,000 families so the stock price goes up. I'm listening." "Not destroying, restructuring. There's a difference." "Is there?" Vanessa picked up her martini and took a long drink. "It's all just words, isn't it? Restructuring, downsizing, optimizing, pretty words for ugly things." Brandon's jaw tightened. "You've never understood business, Vanessa. That's why you've spent your entire life spending other people's money instead of making your own." The words landed like a slap. Vanessa flinched, her fingers tightening around the martini glass. Emma saw her eyes go glassy with tears that wouldn't be allowed to fall. Not here. Not in front of these men who saw crying as weakness. Emma moved to Richard next, serving his soup with practiced precision. He didn't even glance at her, just kept talking, kept pointing at his documents, kept reducing human lives to numbers on a spreadsheet. Brandon was next. He looked up as she approached, his eyes raking over her with the kind of assessment that made her skin crawl, not seeing her as a person, seeing her as a thing. Young, female, beneath his notice except as something to be used or discarded. "Make sure it's hot," he said. "Last time the bisque was lukewarm. Unacceptable." "Yes, sir." Finally, she moved to Harrison. Her hands were starting to ache from holding the heavy tureen, the silver handles pressed into her palms. The soup sloshed gently with each step. She positioned herself carefully, the way Rita had taught her. Feet planted, balanced, ready to pour. Harrison looked up at her, really looked at her. And in his eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Not dismissal, not contempt. Something closer to gratitude. As if her presence at his table meant something more than just efficient service. "Thank you, Emma," he said quietly. It was such a small thing. 2 words. Her name spoken with genuine kindness. But in that moment, with Brandon's cruel words still hanging in the air, and Richard's cold calculations spreading across the table, those 2 words felt like a lifeline. Emma lowered the ladle into the soup. The surface rippled. Steam rose in delicate spirals. She began to lift the filled ladle, the orange liquid gleaming in the candlelight. And then Harrison's hand moved. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't violent, just a sudden spasm, a tremor that started in his shoulder and traveled down his arm, the kind of involuntary movement that came from neurological damage or medication side effects, or a body slowly failing from the inside out. His hand jerked sideways, fast and uncontrolled. Time fractured into slow motion. Emma saw the hand coming, saw it arc through space toward her wrist, saw the fingers, thin and spotted with age, reaching for something they couldn't control. She tried to pull back, tried to move the tureen out of the way, but she was committed to the pour. Off balance. Vulnerable. Harrison's hand struck her wrist with surprising force. The ladle flew from her grip. The tureen tilted. The world narrowed to a single point of catastrophe as 6 quarts of scalding lobster bisque began to fall. The soup hit the tablecloth first, a wave of orange and pink spreading across the white linen like blood on snow. The ceramic serving pieces rattled. The crystal glasses trembled. The soup kept coming, a cascade that seemed endless, pouring off the table edge in a waterfall of wasted luxury. Brandon's suit sleeve caught the worst of it. The expensive silk darkened instantly as the hot liquid soaked through fabric and undershirt and reached skin. His mouth opened in a shout of pain and rage. Richard's leather folder absorbed a direct hit. The merger documents, the spreadsheets that reduced human lives to numbers, all of it soaked through. Ink began to run. Numbers blurred into meaninglessness. And a smaller splash, almost unnoticed in the chaos, caught Harrison's hand where it rested on the table. The thin, papery skin that came with age and illness. The soup burned on contact. Brandon erupted from his chair. "You stupid cow!" The words cut through the dining room. Conversations at nearby tables stopped. Heads turned. The piano music continued, incongruously cheerful against the backdrop of disaster. "Look at this!" Brandon's face had gone red, his neck veins bulging. "This is custom silk. Do you have any idea how much this costs?" Emma stood frozen. The empty tureen dangled from her hands. The horror of what had just happened crashed over her in waves. $2,400. 72 hours. Her mother sitting at home waiting for a miracle. And she'd just destroyed her only chance. "My papers!" Richard screamed, snatching up the soggy folder. "The signatures! Everything's ruined! That's $1 billion contract!" Crawford appeared as if summoned by the gods of restaurant management. His face was white. His eyes darted between the soup spreading across the table, and Emma standing in the wreckage, and the billionaire whose favor could make or break this establishment. "Mr. Westbrook," Crawford stammered, "I am so sorry. This is inexcusable." "The incompetence," Vanessa gasped, though not a single drop had touched her. She pressed a napkin to her face as if the sight of spilled soup might contaminate her. "I can't even eat now. This is disgusting." Emma's knees hit the floor, not from Crawford pushing her, not from anyone's command, just from the weight of failure crushing down until standing was no longer possible. She grabbed napkins, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them, tried to clean the mess, tried to salvage something, anything, from the disaster. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. The words came out broken. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." "Get away from me!" Brandon swatted at her hands. "You've done enough damage!" But Emma wasn't looking at Brandon, wasn't trying to clean his suit or salvage Richard's papers. Her eyes had found Harrison. The old man was hunched in his chair, his burned hand cradled against his chest. His face had gone pale, sweat beaded on his forehead. He was in pain, and no one was helping him. Brandon was worried about his suit, Richard about his documents, Vanessa about her ruined dinner, Crawford about his reputation. Not one of them had looked at the man actually hurt by the accident. Not one of them had noticed their uncle, their stepfather, their boss, sitting there suffering in silence. Something shifted in Emma's chest. The panic receded slightly. The shame took a backseat to something more fundamental. This was a person in pain. Everything else could wait. She abandoned the attempts to clean the table, ignored Brandon's shouting, pushed past Crawford's attempts to pull her away. She moved to Harrison's side and knelt there, her eyes level with his. "Mr. Westbrook," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "Your hand, you're burned." Harrison looked at her with surprise, as if he'd forgotten there were people in the world who might still care about his pain instead of just his money. "I'm fine," he managed, but his voice was weak. "No, you're not." Emma reached for the water pitcher, the one thing that hadn't been knocked over in the chaos. She grabbed a clean napkin from the service station, dipped it in ice water, and gently took Harrison's hand in hers. His skin was hot to the touch, already reddening where the soup had made contact. The burn wasn't severe, but on skin that thin, that fragile. Even a minor burn could become serious if left untreated. "Does this hurt?" she asked, pressing the cold compress against the burn. "We need to get this under cold water immediately," Emma said. She wasn't asking permission, wasn't waiting for Crawford's approval or Brandon's permission. She was simply doing what needed to be done. Behind her, Brandon's voice rose to a new pitch of fury. "Forget about him. What about my suit? This cost $3,500. Emma didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge him. She kept her focus on Harrison, on the old man who'd been kind to her when no one else had bothered, who'd spoken her name like it mattered. "Mr. Westbrook," she said quietly, "I need you to tell me honestly. Are you in pain?" Harrison's eyes met hers. In them she saw surprise, gratitude, something that might have been the beginning of tears. "Yes," he admitted. "It burns." "I know, but this will help." She adjusted the compress, making sure the cold cloth covered the entire affected area. "We should have someone look at this. A burn on elderly skin can get infected easily." "Elderly?" Despite the pain, Harrison managed a small smile. "You have a gift for honesty, Emma." "I learned it from my mother. She was a nurse." "Was? She's sick now. I take care of her." Something passed across Harrison's face. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. As if he saw in Emma's relationship with her mother something he'd lost or never had. The moment shattered as Crawford pushed his way through. "Carter, what have you done?" Emma kept her hand steady on Harrison's, keeping the compress in place. "Mr. Westbrook is injured. He needs medical attention." "Mr. Westbrook needs you to get away from him before you cause more damage." Crawford's face was purple now. "You're fired, do you hear me? Fired! Get your things and get out!" The words hung in the air, final, irrevocable. Emma felt them land like stones in her chest. Fired, no job, No money, no way to pay the rent, no way to buy her mother's medicine. Everything she'd been working for, fighting for, sacrificing for, gone, in the space of a single spilled bowl. But she didn't move, didn't release Harrison's hand, didn't abandon him while he was in pain. "Did you hear me, Carter?" Crawford's voice rose higher. "You're done! Finished! I want you out of this restaurant immediately!" No. The word came from Harrison, quiet, firm, carrying more authority than Crawford could ever manufacture through volume alone. Everyone froze. What? Crawford's face went from purple to white in an instant. Harrison turned his head slowly, pinning Crawford with a gaze that had made corporate rivals crumble and investors panic. "I said no, she's not fired." "But Mr. Westbrook, she just what? Had an accident? An accident that I caused?" Harrison's voice grew stronger. "My arm spasmed. I hit her wrist. If anyone should be fired for this incident, Crawford, it would be me. Are you going to fire me from my own dinner?" Crawford swallowed hard. "Of course not, sir. But surely another server—" "No." Harrison looked down at Emma, still kneeling beside him, still holding the compress to his burn. "She stays. She's the only person at this table who noticed I was in pain while the rest of you were worried about dry cleaning and paperwork. She's the only one who treated me like a human being instead of an inconvenience." He turned to Brandon, his grandson, the heir apparent who just screamed at a waitress over a ruined suit, while his uncle sat there burning. "Sit down, Brandon. It's a suit. Buy another one with the money I gave you last month." Brandon's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous crimson. But he sat. Because when $6 billion spoke, you listened. Harrison looked at Richard next. "And you, Richard. Those papers can be reprinted. Or better yet, maybe this is the universe telling us that merger isn't meant to be. Harrison, we can't just..." "We can, and we will discuss it later. Right now, I want everyone at this table to take a breath and remember that we're human beings, not animals fighting over scraps." The silence that followed was profound. Emma could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the tremor in Harrison's hand where it rested beneath the compress, could sense the rage radiating off Brandon and the confusion from Crawford and something else, something complicated, from Vanessa. And then Vanessa did something unexpected. She stood up, picked up the clean linen napkin from her place setting, walked around the table to where Emma knelt beside Harrison, and without a word, she handed the napkin to Emma. "Use this," Vanessa said quietly. "It's cleaner." Emma looked up, surprised. Vanessa's face was difficult to read. The makeup still perfect, the expression still controlled, but her eyes held something that might have been understanding, or regret, or recognition of something she'd lost along the way. "Thank you," Emma managed. Vanessa nodded. For just a moment, her hand rested on Emma's shoulder, a gesture so brief it might have been imagined. Then she returned to her seat, picked up her martini, and took a long drink. Brandon stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Vanessa, what are you doing?" "Helping." The word was simple. Final. "Helping? She just ruined dinner." "No," Vanessa said, her voice carrying a new edge. "She had an accident while taking care of someone who needed it. There's a difference. Though I wouldn't expect you to understand that, Brandon. You've never taken care of anyone but yourself." Brandon's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. He looked to Richard for support, but the CFO was busy trying to salvage his waterlogged documents and pretending not to hear the family drama unfolding around him. Crawford hovered nearby, uncertain. His entire world had been built on the premise that the customer was always right, that people with money made the rules. But now the person with the most money was defending the waitress who just caused a disaster. The math didn't add up. "Mr. Crawford," Harrison said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "Please have the kitchen prepare fresh courses for everyone, and bring Emma a chair. She's been kneeling long enough." "A chair? Sir, she's staff." "She's a person who's been kind to someone in pain. Bring her a chair or I'll buy this restaurant just to fire you myself." Crawford fled. Emma started to protest. "Mr. Westbrook, I can't sit at your table. It's not appropriate, proper." "Who decides these things, Emma? Who makes the rules that say some people get to sit while others kneel?" Harrison's grip tightened on her hand, the one holding the compress. "Humor an old man. Sit with me for a moment, please." A server appeared with a chair, looking thoroughly confused. Emma sat, feeling the eyes of the entire alcove on her. the uniform that marked her as servant, the burned hand of a billionaire still cradled in her careful grip, the impossible situation she'd somehow found herself in the center of. "Now," Harrison said, addressing the table, "let's discuss what really matters. Not mergers, not stock prices, character." Brandon slumped in his chair, arms crossed like a petulant child. Vanessa sat very still, her eyes distant. Richard had given up on his documents and was signaling for a drink. And Emma sat there, a waitress at a table of millionaires, holding the hand of a dying man who'd somehow decided she was worth defending. In the kitchen, Rita watched through the porthole window in the swinging door. She'd seen the whole thing, the spill, the shouting, Emma's choice to help Harrison instead of cowering before Brandon's rage. And now Emma sitting at table 1 like she belonged there. Rita felt tears running down her cheeks. 25 years she'd worked in restaurants. 25 years of being invisible, of being told she was too old, too slow, too expendable. And in one moment, this young woman had done what Rita had never dared to do. She'd chosen human dignity over self-preservation. Rita wiped her eyes and went back to work. But something had changed. Some small crack had appeared in the wall of her resignation. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still fight left in her after all. Back at table 1, the fresh courses arrived. New soup, new bread, new napkins. The mess cleared away as if it had never happened. But everyone at the table knew something had shifted. Some fundamental understanding of who had power and who deserved compassion. Emma tried to excuse herself. "Mr. Westbrook, your hand should be okay now. I should get back to work." "Not yet." Harrison's voice was gentle but firm. "I want to ask you something first, Emma." "Yes, sir? Why did you help me? You could have tried to save Brandon's suit, or Richard's papers, or just run away from the whole mess. But you chose to take care of an old man's minor burn instead. Why?" Emma thought about her mother, about Sarah sitting in that small apartment, lungs failing, still trying to take care of everyone around her instead of accepting help. About all the people like Rita who spent their lives serving others and never got thanked for it. About the invisible workers who held the world together while the powerful people pretended they'd built everything themselves. "Because you were hurt," she said simply. "And because nobody else was helping you. And because—" She paused, not sure how to explain. "Because my mother taught me that people matter more than things. Always." Harrison's eyes were wet. He nodded slowly. "Your mother is a wise woman. She was a nurse for 30 years. She knows about taking care of people." What happened? "COPD, she can't work anymore, I take care of her now." Harrison absorbed this. Then he said, "That's why you need this job, not for yourself, for her." Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. "And I almost cost you that job tonight." "No, sir. The accident was my fault. I know, but Emma—" Harrison leaned forward, his voice dropping. "What I'm about to tell you might not make sense right now. But trust me when I say that what happened tonight, how you chose to respond, it matters more than you know. You could have chosen self-preservation. You chose compassion instead. Remember that." Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out, saw her mother's name, and her heart clenched. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's my mother. I need to—" "Take it," Harrison said immediately. "Go." Emma stepped away from the table, the phone pressed to her ear. "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah's voice came through, weak and strained. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I saw a bill from the hospital. $8,500. They're saying the foundation that was helping us, the Westbrook Foundation, they've already paid their maximum for the year. We're on our own for the rest." Emma's world tilted. $8,500. On top of the $2,400 for rent. On top of the medication cost. It was impossible. Utterly, completely impossible. "Mom, don't worry about it. I'll figure something out." "How? Baby, you're working yourself to death already. Maybe it's time. Maybe I should go to Sunset Gardens. Maybe—" "No." Emma's voice came out harder than she intended. "I told you. We're going to get through this. Together, okay? Just give me a little more time." She could hear Sarah crying softly on the other end. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not. You're my mother, and I love you. I'll call you later, okay?" Emma ended the call and stood there in the alcove, her back to the table, trying to compose herself. $8,500. It might as well have been $8 million. There was no way. No possible way. Behind her, she didn't see Vanessa watching. Didn't see the look of recognition on the older woman's face. Didn't see Vanessa thinking about her own mother, dead for 20 years, and the things she should have said and done before it was too late. Emma took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and turned back to the table. Professional smile in place, mask firmly on. I apologize for the interruption. Can I get anyone anything else? Harrison studied her face, saw past the smile to the fear underneath, but he said nothing, just nodded and let her retreat to the service station. She didn't see him exchange a look with Vanessa, didn't see him tap the silver pocket watch meaningfully, didn't see the way his fingers moved across the surface, activating something hidden inside. 20 minutes later, Harrison excused himself to use the restroom. He moved slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. Thomas appeared from the shadows to help him, but Harrison waved him off. I can manage. He made his way toward the bathrooms at the back of the restaurant, but he didn't go inside. Instead, he stopped just outside the alcove, in a spot where the architecture created a strange acoustic effect, where sound from table 1 carried clearly if you stood very still and listened carefully. Harrison stood there, one hand on his cane, the other pressing the pocket watch against his chest where the hidden microphone could pick up every word spoken at his table. He'd built an empire by knowing what people said when they thought he wasn't listening. Tonight would be no different. Back at the table, the moment Harrison was out of sight, the atmosphere changed. Brandon leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. Okay, that's enough. We need to talk about what's really happening here. Richard nodded, pulling his chair closer. Agreed. Harrison is clearly not in his right mind. Defending the help, talking about character instead of business. This is worse than we thought. Vanessa said nothing. She swirled her martini, watching the olives spin in the vodka, her face carefully blank. We need to act fast, Brandon continued. If he goes through with this insane idea of testing our character, we could lose everything. The merger, the inheritance, all of it. So what do you suggest? Richard asked. Brandon's eyes drifted toward the service station where Emma stood, unaware she was being watched. A cruel smile spread across his face. I suggest we give Uncle Harrison exactly what he's looking for. Proof that he needs help. Proof that he can't be trusted to make rational decisions anymore. What kind of proof? The kind that comes from a neutral third party. Someone who has no reason to lie. Brandon gestured toward Emma. Someone like her. In his hiding spot outside the alcove, Harrison closed his eyes and listened. The pocket watch recorded every word. And with each syllable, his last hope for his family died a little more. But there was still Emma, the woman who'd chosen compassion over self-preservation, who'd knelt beside an old man in pain while billionaires screamed about suits and paperwork. Maybe, Harrison thought, just maybe, not everyone had forgotten how to be human. He pressed the watch closer and kept listening. At the table, Vanessa felt like she was watching herself from a great distance. The beautiful woman in the red Versace dress, the one with the perfect makeup and the practiced smile. That wasn't really her anymore. Or maybe it had never been her at all. Maybe she'd been playing a role for so long she'd forgotten there used to be a real person underneath. She thought about Emma, the waitress who couldn't have been more than 28, 29, young enough to still have ideals, young enough to think kindness mattered more than survival. Vanessa remembered being that age, remembered working as a waitress herself in Los Angeles, before she'd met husband number 1, before the money and the plastic surgery and the gradual erosion of everything she used to believe in. 22 years old, working double shifts at a diner on Sunset Boulevard. A customer had screamed at her once for bringing his eggs over easy instead of scrambled, had called her stupid, worthless, threatened to have her fired. And another customer, a woman Vanessa had never seen before and never saw again, had stood up and told the man to shut his mouth, had told him that waitresses were human beings who deserved respect. Vanessa had never forgotten that moment, the shock of having someone defend her, the radical notion that she had worth beyond her ability to bring someone the right breakfast order. When had she stopped being the grateful waitress and become the customer who looked through service workers like they were invisible? She watched Emma at the service station, saw the way the young woman's hands were still trembling, saw the fear poorly hidden behind the professional mask. And she saw something else, too. The phone call. The way Emma had stepped away. The way her whole body had curled in on itself like she was absorbing a physical blow. Medical bills, Vanessa thought. That's what breaks people. Not dramatic tragedies, just the slow accumulation of impossible numbers. Margaret, Harrison's wife, Vanessa's stepmother, had taught her something once. They'd been sitting in the garden of the old house, the one Harrison had sold after Margaret died because he couldn't stand the memories. Margaret was already sick then, the cancer eating through her, but she'd smiled at Vanessa and said something Vanessa had dismissed at the time. Beauty fades, Vanessa. Money comes and goes. But character, that's forever. That's the only thing you take with you when you leave this world. Vanessa had been 30 then, beautiful enough to believe beauty would last forever, rich enough to believe money solved everything. She'd nodded and smiled and ignored the advice completely. Now sitting at this table watching Brandon and Richard plot to destroy a young woman's life for their own convenience, she understood what Margaret had meant. Character was the only thing that mattered. And Vanessa had spent 20 years sacrificing hers piece by piece until there was almost nothing left. Are you listening, Vanessa? Brandon snapped his fingers in front of her face. She blinked, pulled back to the present. What? I said we need to move fast, before Harrison comes back. We need that waitress to make a statement. A statement about what? But Vanessa knew. She could see it in Brandon's eyes. The same calculation she'd seen in two ex-husbands' eyes when they decided she was no longer worth the trouble. Richard leaned forward, his voice pitched low. Harrison is clearly experiencing cognitive decline. The board has been concerned for months. Erratic decisions, emotional outbursts. And tonight's performance? Defending a clumsy waitress? Talking about character tests? It's textbook dementia. He's dying, Vanessa heard herself say. Not demented, there's a difference. Is there? Brandon's smile was cold. Because from where I'm sitting, a man who values a servant's feelings over a billion-dollar merger is a man who can't be trusted with his own company. So what do you want to do? Have him declared incompetent? Exactly. Richard pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. We have precedent. 3 board members have already expressed concerns privately. If we can document tonight's incident properly, including testimony from an objective third-party witness, we can petition for emergency guardianship, transfer decision-making authority to the family until his health situation resolves itself. Until he dies, Vanessa translated silently. They were just waiting for Harrison to die so they could take everything. And the waitress is your objective witness? She asked. Brandon nodded. She's perfect. She saw the whole thing, saw him spill soup, saw him defend her inappropriately, saw him force her to sit at our table like we're all equals. Any reasonable person would see that as evidence of diminished capacity. She won't do it, Vanessa said. She's grateful to him. He defended her. Everyone has a price. Brandon pulled out his money clip, the thick wad of hundreds he carried like a security blanket. Especially people who are desperate. And trust me, that girl is desperate. You heard the phone call. Medical bills, rent probably, student loans, all the pathetic little debts that keep the working class exactly where they belong. Richard nodded. 4,000 should do it, maybe 5. Just enough to solve her immediate problems. Just enough to make her tell a little white lie that helps a sick old man get the care he needs. Vanessa felt sick. You want to bribe her to lie about Harrison. I want to help her solve her problems while also ensuring my uncle gets proper medical supervision. It's a win for everyone. It's fraud. It's pragmatism. Brandon leaned back, confident now. Look, Vanessa, I know you've gotten soft lately. All that therapy, all that soul-searching about your purpose or whatever. But this is the real world. This is business. And in business, you do what needs to be done. By destroying people? By making hard choices. Something you've never had to do because daddy's money has always been there to catch you. Brandon's voice turned cruel. But maybe you should think about what happens if Harrison cuts you out of the will entirely. What then? You're 42, Vanessa, divorced twice, no skills, no education, no prospects. How long do you think you'll last when the money runs out? The words hit like physical blows. Because they were true. Every cruel syllable was true. Vanessa had nothing. Was nothing, just a beautiful shell that was starting to crack with age. But she thought about Emma again, about the choice the young woman had made when the soup spilled. She could have tried to save Brandon's suit, could have groveled and begged for forgiveness. Instead, she'd knelt beside an old man in pain and offered him comfort. When was the last time Vanessa had made a choice like that? When was the last time she'd put another person's well-being ahead of her own comfort? I don't like this, she said quietly. Brandon waved her concerns away. You don't have to like it, you just have to not interfere. Can you do that? Can you keep your mouth shut and let the adults handle this? Vanessa looked at her martini, 3 olives floating in expensive vodka. The drink probably cost more than Emma made in tips all night. Everything in Vanessa's life was expensive and meaningless and hollow. She thought about Margaret in the garden, about character being the only thing that mattered, about the woman she used to be before the money and the marriages, and the slow death of everything she'd once believed in. "Vanessa?" Brandon prompted. "Are you with us or against us?" She opened her mouth to answer. To say yes, she'd stay quiet. She wouldn't interfere. To choose the easy path that kept her safe and fed and sheltered from the consequences of having a conscience. But before she could speak, she caught sight of Emma again. The young woman was preparing fresh water pitchers, her movements mechanical. And even from across the room, Vanessa could see the exhaustion, the fear, the weight of impossible choices. Vanessa started. "Don't overthink it," Richard cut in. "This isn't a moral dilemma, it's a business decision. We're not hurting anyone. We're helping Harrison get the medical care he needs while also protecting the company. The girl gets paid for a simple statement. Everyone wins." "Does everyone win?" Vanessa heard herself ask. "Or do you two win while an old man loses his autonomy and a young woman loses her integrity?" Brandon's face darkened. "Careful, Vanessa. Or what? You'll cut me out too? Maybe you should. Maybe I deserve it." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She needed air, needed space, needed to get away from the poison at this table before it infected what little remained of her soul. "Where are you going?" Brandon demanded. "The restroom." "We're not done discussing this." "I am." Vanessa walked away on shaking legs. She made it to the women's restroom and locked herself in a stall. Then she finally let herself cry. Not the pretty tears that men found attractive, the ugly, wrenching sobs of someone who just realized how far she'd fallen from the person she used to be. In the mirror, when she finally emerged, her makeup was ruined. Mascara ran down her cheeks in black streaks. Lipstick smeared, the beautiful mask literally falling apart. Good, she thought. Let it fall. Let everyone see the mess underneath. She cleaned her face as best she could, but she didn't reapply the makeup. Didn't try to reconstruct the perfect facade, just splashed cold water on her red eyes and looked at herself. Really looked. 42 years old, 2 failed marriages. No purpose beyond spending money she hadn't earned. No legacy beyond being beautiful. And that was fading fast. But it wasn't too late. Margaret's words echoed in her head. Character. The only thing that mattered. The only thing you took with you. Vanessa made a decision. She didn't know if it was the right one, didn't know if it would cost her everything. But for the first time in years, it felt like a choice made by the real Vanessa, not the persona she'd constructed. She walked back to the table with her head up. Brandon and Richard were deep in conversation, their heads close together, plotting. They barely noticed when she sat down. 4,000 cash, Brandon was saying. "I'll handle it. Once Harrison is back, we'll call her over, make the offer. She'll take it. They always take it." Richard nodded. "And we'll need her to make the statement tonight if possible. Get it documented while the incident is fresh. By tomorrow, we can have the guardianship paperwork filed." "What about Vanessa?" Richard glanced at her. "Can we trust her to keep quiet?" Brandon looked at Vanessa too. His eyes were calculating, assessing whether she was an ally or a liability. "Vanessa understands how the world works," he said slowly. "Don't you, Vanessa? You understand that sometimes we have to make difficult choices for the greater good." Vanessa met his gaze. For a moment, she almost caved, almost fell back into the pattern of agreeing, of going along, of choosing comfort over conscience. Then she thought about Emma kneeling beside Harrison, about choosing compassion when it would have been easier to run, about being the kind of person who helped instead of hurt. "I understand perfectly," Vanessa said quietly. Brandon smiled, thinking he'd won. He had no idea Vanessa had just chosen a side, and it wasn't his. Across the restaurant, Emma stood at the service station trying to figure out how she was going to tell her mother that there was no solution coming, that $8,500 might as well have been $8 million, that maybe Sarah was right. Maybe it was time to consider Sunset Gardens, to accept defeat, to give up on the impossible dream of keeping her mother home and safe. She looked toward table 1, saw Brandon and Richard with their heads together, saw Vanessa sitting alone, looking somehow smaller than before. And she saw the empty chair where Harrison had been sitting, still waiting for him to return. He'd been kind to her, had defended her when he had no reason to, had made her feel seen when everyone else had looked right through her. But kindness didn't pay rent, didn't buy medication, didn't solve the fundamental problem of being poor in a world that only valued wealth. Emma felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Not here, not at work. She could fall apart later, at home, where only her mother would see. She straightened her uniform and went to refill the water glasses. It was all she knew how to do. Just keep working, keep moving forward, keep pretending everything would somehow work out, even when the math made it clear it wouldn't. Behind her, she didn't notice Rita watching from the kitchen door. Didn't see the older woman's face etched with concern and anger, and something that might have been pride. Rita had watched Emma make a choice tonight, had watched her choose compassion over self-preservation. And Rita knew, even if Emma didn't, that choices like that had consequences. Sometimes good, sometimes terrible. But always they mattered. She just hoped the consequences wouldn't destroy this brave, foolish young woman who'd reminded Rita that kindness still existed in the world. Harrison returned to the table 5 minutes later. He looked more tired than before. The pain medication he'd refused earlier was probably wearing off. His hand, the one Emma had treated, was still red, but protected now by a clean bandage that the restaurant's first aid kit had provided. He sat down slowly, his eyes sweeping across the table, taking in Brandon's barely suppressed rage, Richard's nervous energy, Vanessa's ruined makeup and red eyes. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "Fine," Brandon said too quickly. "Just discussing business while you were away." "Of course you were." Harrison picked up his pocket watch, the one that had been recording every word. He ran his thumb across the tarnished surface. "Business is all any of you ever discuss. Business and money and power. Never just life." "Life doesn't pay the bills, Uncle." "No," Harrison agreed, "but money doesn't buy happiness either. Trust me, I've tried." He looked toward the service station where Emma stood, caught her eye, gave her a small, sad smile. She smiled back uncertainly. "I'm ready for dessert," Harrison announced. "Something sweet to end this evening. And then I think we should all go home and think very carefully about what kind of people we want to be." Brandon exchanged a look with Richard. The look said, "Now, make the offer now while Harrison is distracted." Brandon pulled out his money clip, the thick wad of $100 bills. He placed it on the table between the water glasses and the bread plates. $4,000, maybe 5, enough to solve Emma's immediate problems, enough to buy her cooperation. He raised his hand, signaling for Emma to approach. She saw the gesture, saw the money on the table, saw the expectant looks on Brandon and Richard's faces, and she walked toward them, having no idea she was walking straight into a trap that would test everything she believed about herself. Harrison watched her come. His hand rested on the pocket watch, the recording device still running, still capturing every word. The test was about to reach its climax, and Harrison prayed, to a God he wasn't sure existed anymore, that at least one person at this table would choose integrity over money. "Please," he thought, "please let there be someone left in this world who can't be bought." Emma reached the table. "Yes, sir? Did you need something?" Brandon smiled. It was the smile of a predator sizing up prey. "Actually, Emma," he said, his voice dripping with false kindness, "we wanted to have a word with you about tonight's incident and about how you can help us. Help Uncle Harrison get the care he truly needs." The money sat on the table between them, glittering, tempting, the solution to all of Emma's problems wrapped in crisp $100 bills. All she had to do was reach out and take it. The money sat on the white tablecloth like a test from God himself. Crisp $100 bills bound together with a silver clip that probably cost more than Emma made in a week. She could see Benjamin Franklin's face repeated over and over, stacked so thick the bundle looked almost obscene in its abundance. $4,000, maybe 5. She couldn't tell exactly without counting, but the weight of it, the sheer physical presence of that much cash, made the air in the alcove feel heavier. Emma stood beside the table with her hands clasped in front of her apron, her professional mask firmly in place. But beneath that mask, her heart hammered against her ribs like something trying to escape. She kept her eyes on Brandon's face, not the money. Looking at the money felt dangerous, like staring directly into the sun. But she could feel it there, could sense it the way you sensed another person standing too close in a crowded room. The bill seemed to pulse with possibility. Rent paid, medicine bought, her mother's lungs filling with air that didn't hurt, the leak in the ceiling fixed, maybe even new shoes to replace the ones with holes worn through the soles. All of it sitting there, waiting, within reach. "Emma," Brandon said, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. "Please, sit down. We want to talk to you." "I'm working, sir. I shouldn't." "It'll just take a moment." Brandon gestured to the chair Harrison had insisted she use earlier. "Please, we're concerned about my uncle and we think you might be able to help us." Emma sat. Not because she wanted to, but because saying no to people with money felt impossible when you had none. The chair felt wrong beneath her. Too comfortable. Too expensive. A waitress didn't sit at tables like this. A waitress served and cleared and stayed invisible. Richard leaned forward, his pudgy hands folded on the table. "Emma, you seem like a smart young woman, observant. So you've probably noticed that my colleague Mr. Westbrook is not well." "He told me he's sick, yes, sir." "Did he tell you what kind of sick?" Brandon asked. Emma hesitated. Harrison had mentioned cancer, pancreatic cancer, 4 months to live. But that felt private, the kind of information you didn't share with strangers, even if those strangers were family. "He said he was dying," she said carefully. "Dying, yes, but there's more to it than that." Brandon's expression shifted into something that might have passed for concern if you didn't look too closely at his eyes. "We're worried about his mental state. The cancer, the pain medications, the stress of knowing he doesn't have much time left. It's affecting his judgment." Emma thought about Harrison defending her, about the way he'd spoken to her with kindness and respect, about how his eyes were sad but clear, aware but weary. "He seemed lucid to me, sir." "Did he?" Richard pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. A man who defends a server who just ruined his dinner. A man who forces that same server to sit at his table like an equal. A man who talks about character tests instead of business during a critical merger discussion. Does that sound like someone in full possession of his faculties? The words were smooth, reasonable, wrapped in concern that sounded almost genuine. But something about the way Richard said them made Emma's skin crawl. "I think he was being kind," Emma said quietly. "Kind." Brandon repeated the word like it was foreign. "Emma, my uncle has $6 billion. He runs a company with 15,000 employees. He makes decisions that affect entire supply chains across the Pacific. Do you really think kindness to a waitress should take priority over his fiduciary responsibilities?" Emma didn't know what fiduciary meant, but she understood the implication, that Harrison caring about her pain mattered less than Harrison caring about stock prices. That compassion was a symptom of weakness rather than a sign of humanity. "I don't know anything about business, sir," she said. "Exactly." Brandon's voice warmed, like he'd just made a point. "You don't know about business. But you do know what you saw tonight. And what you saw was a sick old man having what we believe was a cognitive episode. The spilled soup, the inappropriate boundary crossing, the emotional outbursts." "It wasn't an outburst, he just what? Defended you?" Brandon leaned closer. "Emma, I'm going to be honest with you. We love my uncle, he's family, but he's dying and he's not thinking clearly anymore. He needs help, professional care. And we can't get him that help unless we can prove to the doctors that he's experiencing mental decline." Richard nodded along. "We're trying to protect him before he makes decisions he can't take back, before he signs away the company to the wrong people or destroys decades of careful planning because he's confused and scared." Emma looked at Vanessa, the only other woman at the table, hoping for some sign, some indication of whether this was real or manipulation. But Vanessa sat very still, her ruined makeup making her look older and somehow more honest than before. Her expression was unreadable. "What do you want from me?" Emma asked, though she already knew, could feel it coming like a storm building on the horizon. Brandon placed his hand on the money. "We need you to make a statement, just a simple description of what you witnessed tonight. Harrison's erratic behavior, his confusion, the way he couldn't control his own movements when the soup spilled, the way he made inappropriate demands about you sitting at our table. But that's not what happened, isn't it?" Richard pulled out a small recording device, the kind reporters used. "Let me be clear about what we're asking for. We're not asking you to lie. We're asking you to describe what happened from a certain perspective, a perspective that takes into account the full context of Harrison's deteriorating condition. Emma stared at the recorder, at the money, at the two men watching her with predatory patience. "How much?" she heard herself ask. The words tasted like ashes in her mouth. Brandon smiled. $4,000, cash, right now, no taxes, no paperwork. Just a simple statement on this recording device about what you observed tonight, and the money is yours. $4,000, the rent, part of the hospital bill, medicine for her mother, food that wasn't instant ramen, maybe even enough left over to fix the leak in the ceiling that had been getting worse every day. Emma's hands were shaking. She pressed them together harder, trying to make them stop, trying to think past the roaring in her ears. "And if I don't?" she whispered. Richard's expression hardened. "Then we'll find someone who will. And we'll make sure Harrison knows you refused to help when he needed it most. We'll make sure everyone in this city knows you're the kind of person who values pride over an old man's welfare. Plus," Brandon added, his voice going cold, "we'll have a conversation with Mr. Crawford about tonight's incident, about the damage you caused, about how you should never have been given such an important table to begin with. I'm sure we can make a compelling case that you're a liability this restaurant can't afford." The threat hung in the air, clear, unambiguous. Take the money and lie, or lose everything anyway. Emma thought about her mother sitting in that small apartment, about the eviction notice, about the medication Sarah needed just to breathe, about the choices that shouldn't have to be choices. Food or medicine, rent or dignity, survival or integrity. She looked at the money again, really looked at it this time. Saw not just the bills, but what they represented. Every shift her mother had worked while sick. Every double shift Emma had pulled until her feet bled. Every time they'd chosen to eat rice and beans for a week so they could afford the copay on an inhaler. $4,000 was more than money. It was months of suffering reduced to a stack of paper. It was the difference between homelessness and survival. It was everything. And all she had to do was destroy a man who'd shown her kindness. "He defended me," Emma said, the words coming out barely above a whisper. "When Mr. Crawford tried to fire me, Mr. Westbrook stood up for me. He didn't have to do that." "He did it because he's confused," Brandon said. "Because he's not thinking straight. Because he needs help." "No," Emma's voice grew stronger. "He did it because I helped him when he was hurt. Because I saw him as a person instead of just a rich man. Because—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Because that's what decent human beings do for each other." Richard's patience was wearing thin. "Emma, I don't think you understand the situation you're in. You need money. We have money. This isn't complicated." "You're right," Emma said. "I do need money. Desperately. My mother has $8,500 in medical bills we can't pay. We're getting evicted in 3 days. I don't know how we're going to eat next week." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "So, yes, I need that money more than you can possibly imagine." Brandon reached for the stack of bills, ready to push them across the table. "Then take it. All you have to do is—" "But I can't." The words came out firm, final. Emma heard them leave her mouth and felt something shift inside her chest. Terror and relief mixing together into something that felt almost like peace. Brandon froze. "What?" "I can't do it. I won't lie about Mr. Westbrook. Not for $4,000, not for $40,000, not for any amount of money." Richard's face went red. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make." Emma stood up, her legs somehow steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Mr. Westbrook was kind to me tonight. He treated me like a human being when everyone else treated me like furniture. And I won't betray that. I won't destroy someone's reputation just because I'm desperate." She looked at the money one last time, felt the weight of everything she was giving up. The rent, the medicine, the food, the hope, all of it sitting there within reach, and she was walking away. Emma saw her future in that moment, saw herself 3 days from now, packing what little they owned into garbage bags, saw her mother struggling to breathe in some county shelter, saw herself applying for jobs at fast food restaurants, places that didn't do background checks on why she'd been fired. She saw medical bills piling up, burying them, saw her mother's face growing thinner, grayer, fading, saw herself 10 years from now, alone, wondering what her life might have been if she'd just taken the money and compromised to survive. And she saw something else, saw herself looking in a mirror 20 years from now and seeing a stranger. Someone who'd sold her soul for $4,000 and spent every day since trying to convince herself it had been worth it. "My mother taught me something," Emma said, her voice quiet but clear. "She taught me that being poor doesn't mean you have to be cheap, that having nothing doesn't mean you are nothing, that integrity is the one thing nobody can take from you unless you give it away." She turned to leave, to walk away from more money than she'd see in 6 months of wages, to choose dignity over survival.
"You'll regret this," Brandon snarled. "We'll make sure you regret this."
Emma stopped, turned back, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the alcove with surprising strength. "You know what the difference is between people like you and people like me? You think everyone has a price because you've never had to choose between your principles and your next meal. But I have. And I'm choosing principles. Because at the end of the day, I still have to look at myself in the mirror. And I won't see a woman who sold out a good man for cash." She started to walk away again. And that's when Vanessa stood up. The movement was so sudden, so unexpected, that everyone at the table froze. Vanessa's chair scraped against the floor. Her hands were shaking, but her jaw was set in a way that made her look younger, stronger, more like the person she might have been before money and marriages had worn her down. "Wait," Vanessa said. Emma turned confused. Vanessa stepped around the table, moving until she stood between Emma and the two men. Her red dress seemed less glamorous now, more like armor, her ruined makeup like war paint. "Brandon," Vanessa said, her voice carrying a new edge. "Stop." "Vanessa, sit down. This doesn't concern you." "It does concern me. Because I was sitting here listening to you plot to destroy our father, to bribe this young woman into lying, to take advantage of her desperation, and I was going to let you do it." Vanessa's voice broke slightly. "I was going to sit here in silence and watch you do something evil, and I was going to say nothing because I was scared of losing my allowance." "Vanessa," Richard warned. "Shut up, Richard." Vanessa didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Emma. "I want to tell you something. 22 years ago, I was you. I was a waitress in Los Angeles. I was broke. I was desperate. And someone tried to buy me, not with $4,000, with marriage, with security, with the promise that I'd never have to worry about money again if I just stopped being myself." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And I took it. I took the money. I married a man I didn't love because he was rich. And then I married another one. And I've spent 2 decades being beautiful and useless and empty, living off my stepfather's generosity while despising myself a little more each day." Vanessa turned to Brandon. "But tonight, watching this girl, this waitress who has every reason to take your dirty money, watching her walk away, I remembered who I used to be. Before the surgery, before the designer clothes, before I sold my soul piece by piece until there was nothing left." "This is very touching," Brandon said sarcastically. "But it doesn't change anything." "It changes everything." Vanessa picked up the stack of money from the table. For a moment, Emma thought she was going to hand it to her. But instead, Vanessa threw it. The bills scattered across the alcove, floating down like obscene snow. Hundreds of dollars spinning through the air, landing on the floor, on the table, in the remains of the spilled soup. "Emma doesn't want your money," Vanessa said, "and neither do I. Not anymore." Brandon shot to his feet. "You've lost your mind, both of you. You're throwing away everything." "No," Vanessa said quietly. "I'm finding something I lost. Something I didn't even realize I missed until I saw this girl choose integrity over survival." She turned to Emma, and there were tears running down her face now, cutting fresh tracks through her ruined makeup. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I sat here and listened to them plan this. I'm sorry I almost let them do it. I'm sorry for every time I looked through people like you and pretended you didn't exist." Emma didn't know what to say. This beautiful, broken woman who'd lived a life so different from her own, apologizing like they were equals. Like Emma's forgiveness mattered. "It's okay," Emma said softly. "It's not. But maybe I can start making it okay, starting now." Vanessa turned back to Brandon and Richard. "You want to declare Harrison incompetent? You want to take over the company? You'll have to do it without me. Because I'm done. I'm done being part of your schemes. I'm done pretending money matters more than people. I'm done being someone I hate." Brandon's face had gone from red to purple. "You'll regret this when he cuts you out of the will. When you're broke and alone and nobody wants you anymore, you'll regret this." "Maybe," Vanessa agreed. But I'll regret it with my integrity intact. That's more than you'll ever have. The alcove fell into shocked silence. Emma stood there with scattered $100 bills at her feet, watching this woman she'd served soup to earlier transform into someone entirely different. Someone brave. And then Harrison's voice cut through the silence. Well said, Vanessa. Everyone turned. Harrison stood at the entrance to the alcove, leaning heavily on his cane. Thomas was beside him, one hand hovering near the old man's elbow. But Harrison's eyes were clear and sharp and filled with something that might have been satisfaction or might have been sadness or might have been both. He walked slowly to the table, each step clearly painful. But he didn't stop until he stood at the head, looking down at his nephew and his CFO with an expression they'd never seen before. Not anger, something colder, something final. "How long have you been standing there?" Brandon demanded, his voice shaking. "Long enough." Harrison lowered himself into his chair. "But actually, Brandon, I've been listening much longer than that." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out the silver pocket watch, the tarnished, battered timepiece that had sat on the table all evening. He opened it with a soft click. Inside, where the clockwork should have been, was a small electronic device. Circuit boards, a blinking red light, a microphone no bigger than a grain of rice. Brandon's face went white. "Did you really think I'd host this dinner without preparing?" Harrison asked softly. "Did you really believe I'd announce a test of character and not have a way to evaluate the results?" Richard's hands were shaking. You recorded us?" "Every word. From the moment you sat down, the conversation about eliminating redundancies, the plotting when I went to the restroom, the attempt to bribe Emma into making false statements about my mental competence, all of it." Harrison's finger traced the edge of the watch. "Washington is a two-party consent state for recordings. But this is my private property, my table, my dinner, and I have every right to record conversations that take place on my own property." He looked at Richard. "You should know that, Richard. You're the one who helped me install security systems in all my properties to protect against corporate espionage. Did you think I wouldn't use the same technology to protect against family treachery?" Richard had no answer. Harrison turned his attention to Brandon. "My nephew, the boy I groomed to take over the company, the one I sent to Harvard Business School, the one I trusted with executive decisions." His voice grew quieter, more dangerous. "The one who just tried to manipulate a desperate young woman into committing fraud so he could steal control of my company before I'm even cold in the ground." "Uncle Harrison, I can explain." "No." The word cracked like a whip. "You cannot explain. There is no explanation that justifies what I just heard. You wanted proof of cognitive decline, of erratic behavior. Look in a mirror, Brandon. Because the only person at this table who's shown a complete break from basic human decency is you." Harrison turned to Emma, his expression softening. "Ms. Carter, I owe you an apology." "Sir?" "I put you in an impossible position tonight. I defended you, knowing it would make you a target. I've been testing my family, but in doing so, I used you as bait. That was unfair, and I'm sorry." Emma shook her head. "You defended me when I would have lost my job. You don't owe me an apology." "I do. But I also owe you something else." Harrison pulled out a checkbook, an old-fashioned paper checkbook that probably hadn't been used in years. "You refused $4,000 because it came with strings attached, because it required you to compromise your principles. But what if I offered you money with no strings? Just gratitude from an old man who's been reminded that goodness still exists in the world?" He began writing, his hand steady despite the pain he must have been in. "This is for your mother's medical bills. All of them. And for rent? And for whatever else you need to keep yourself and your mother safe and healthy." He tore out the check and handed it to Emma. She looked down at it and felt the world tilt sideways. $500,000. The number was so large it didn't look real, like a movie prop, like something that couldn't possibly exist on a piece of paper being handed to a waitress in a soup-stained uniform. "Mr. Westbrook," she whispered, "I can't, It's yours. No conditions, no expectations. Just a gift from someone who's learned that the only thing worth more than money is finding someone who can't be bought." Emma's hand shook as she held the check. Her vision blurred with tears. She tried to speak, but couldn't find words big enough to hold what she was feeling. Harrison wasn't finished. "But I want to offer you something else, something more important than money." "More important than $500,000? Emma managed. "Much more important. I have a foundation. the Westbrook Legacy Foundation. It controls $2.5 billion dedicated to helping people like your mother, people who fall through the cracks of our healthcare system, people who work hard their entire lives and still end up choosing between medicine and food. He leaned forward. The foundation needs a new director, someone who understands what it means to be desperate, someone who knows the value of a dollar because they've had to choose which bills to pay, someone who has integrity that can't be purchased. Emma stared at him. You want me to run a $2 billion foundation? I want you to run it with heart. I'll teach you everything else. I have about 4 months left, maybe 5. I'll spend that time training you, teaching you about budgets and grant proposals and how to spot corruption. And when I'm gone, you'll carry on the work. You'll make sure the foundation helps people instead of just being a tax shelter. But I'm just a waitress. I don't have a degree. I don't know anything about running a nonprofit. You have something better than a degree. You have compassion. You have integrity. And you have the lived experience of being one of the people we're trying to help. Harrison smiled. Besides, you won't be alone. I'm going to make sure you have support. He turned to Vanessa. If you meant what you said, if you're serious about changing, I'm offering you a position at the foundation as well, Director of Development. You'll work with Emma. You'll use those social connections you've been building for 20 years. But instead of using them to get into the right parties, you'll use them to raise money for people who need it. Vanessa's eyes widened. You trust me with that? After I sat there and let them... You stood up when it mattered. You chose the right side before it was too late. That's what character looks like, Vanessa. Not perfection, just the courage to do the right thing even when it costs you everything. Vanessa started crying again. Real tears, grateful tears. Thank you, Father. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Harrison turned back to Brandon and Richard. As for you two. The temperature in the alcove seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brandon, you're fired from Westbrook Maritime. Effective immediately. Your shares will be bought out at current market value. You'll receive exactly what you're contractually owed and not a penny more. And you are hereby banned from all company properties. Brandon's mouth opened and closed. You can't do this. I own 51% of voting shares. I absolutely can do this, and I just did. Harrison looked at Richard. You, Mr. Sterling, I'm sure the board will want to discuss your future once they hear this recording. But that's not my decision to make. What is my decision is this. You have until tomorrow morning to resign. If you don't, I'll have this recording delivered to the Securities and Exchange Commission, along with the forensic audit I commissioned 6 months ago that shows $3.5 million in embezzlement from the Corporate Maintenance Fund. Richard went even whiter than he already was. You knew? I've known for months. I was hoping you'd have the integrity to confess, to make it right. But clearly, I was mistaken about your character. I have a family, a wife, kids. If this comes out, then you should have thought about them before you stole money that could have been used for worker safety equipment, before you lined your pockets while dock workers risked their lives on faulty machinery. Harrison's voice was ice. But I'll give you this. Resign quietly, return the money, and I won't press charges. Your family won't have to watch you go to prison. That's more mercy than you showed anyone else. Richard grabbed his ruined documents and fled. Just stood up and ran from the table like a coward, leaving scattered papers and spilled soup in his wake. Brandon sat frozen for a moment longer. Then he leaned across the table, his face ugly with rage. This isn't over, old man. I'll fight you. I'll sue. I'll make your last month's hell. Do your worst, Harrison said calmly. I'm dying anyway. You can't hurt me more than the cancer already has. But I can hurt you. I can make sure every board member, every investor, every business contact in this city knows exactly what you tried to do tonight. I can destroy your reputation so thoroughly that you'll never work in this industry again. He picked up the pocket watch. It's all here, recorded, backed up to 3 separate servers. Try to sue me and I'll release it publicly. Your choice. Brandon stood, knocking his chair backwards. He looked at Emma with pure hatred. This is your fault. You could have just taken the money. You could have helped us help him. Help him? Emma found her voice finally. You were trying to steal from him. You were waiting for him to die so you could take everything he built. He's a dying old man. What does he need it for? Maybe he needs it to leave a legacy that matters, Emma shot back. Maybe he needs to know the world will be a little better after he's gone. Maybe he needs to die with dignity instead of being betrayed by his own family. Brandon had no answer for that. He just grabbed his coat and stormed out, nearly knocking over a server on his way to the exit. And then there were four: Harrison, Emma, Vanessa, and Thomas, still standing quietly in the background like he'd been doing for 35 years. The silence that followed felt sacred, like the moment after a storm when you could finally hear yourself think again. Harrison looked tired, more tired than Emma had ever seen a person look, like he'd used up all his strength confronting his family and had nothing left. But there was also something else in his expression. Relief, maybe? Or peace. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said quietly. "I'm not," Vanessa said. "I needed to see it. Needed to see what we'd become." She looked at Emma. "What you did tonight. Refusing that money even though you needed it so desperately. I don't think I've ever seen anything braver." Emma didn't feel brave. She felt terrified, overwhelmed, like she was standing in the middle of a river watching her entire life change direction. "I just did what my mother would have done," she said. "Then your mother is a remarkable woman. I'd like to meet her someday." Harrison smiled. "You will. Both of you will work closely together at the foundation. You'll probably see a lot of each other." He looked down at his watch, the one that had recorded everything. "I should go home. Thomas, please call the car." "Already waiting, sir." Harrison stood slowly, every movement painful. Emma moved to help him, but he waved her off gently. "I'm all right. Just old and tired and ready to rest." He looked at Emma one more time. "Will you accept my offer? The job at the foundation?" Emma thought about her mother, about the check for $500,000 in her hand, about the chance to help other people who were drowning in medical bills and impossible choices, about doing work that actually mattered. "Yes," she said, "I'll do it. I'll try my best." "That's all anyone can ask." Harrison smiled. "Come by my office tomorrow. Thomas will give you the address. We'll start your training." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Emma, thank you. Thank you for reminding me that goodness still exists. Thank you for being incorruptible in a world that tries to buy everyone. Thank you for proving that I haven't completely failed as a human being." Then he was gone, walking slowly out of the restaurant with Thomas supporting his elbow, leaving Emma and Vanessa standing in the alcove surrounded by scattered money and overturned chairs, and the wreckage of a family destroyed by greed. Vanessa bent down and started picking up the $100 bills Brandon had thrown. "We should collect these. Give them to charity or something. Seems wrong to just leave them lying around." Emma knelt beside her and helped gather the money. Their hands worked together, collecting bills that neither of them wanted anymore, bills that had represented everything and now meant nothing. "Why did you stand up for me?" Emma asked. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because I saw myself in you, the person I used to be before I let fear make all my decisions, and I wanted to be that person again, even if it was just for a moment." "You were very brave." "No, you were brave. I just finally stopped being a coward." Vanessa smiled, and for the first time all night, it looked genuine. "But maybe we can help each other. You teach me how to care about things again. I'll teach you how to navigate the world of rich people without losing yourself." "Deal." They stood together, holding a stack of bills that had been meant as a bribe, and now felt more like evidence. Evidence that integrity could still win. That character still mattered. That even in a world ruled by money, some things remained priceless. Crawford appeared in the doorway, his face pale and confused. "Is everything... What happened? Where did Mr. Westbrook go?" "Home," Emma said simply. "And the check? Did someone pay for dinner?" Vanessa laughed. "Oh, I think Harrison paid for much more than dinner tonight. But yes, put it on his account. And add a 25% tip for the staff." "For all the staff?" Crawford looked stunned. "Especially for Rita Chen," Emma added. "She's been here 25 years. She deserves to be recognized." Crawford nodded and hurried away, still confused but knowing better than to argue with people who had billionaire friends. Emma and Vanessa walked together toward the back of the restaurant, toward the staff area where Rita was probably still working, still invisible, still holding everything together while the rich people played their games. "Rita!" Emma called out as they entered the kitchen. The older woman turned, her face exhausted but curious. "Emma? What's going on? I saw Mr. Westbrook leave. Did something happen?" Emma held up the check, the one for $500,000. "Something happened, something wonderful and terrifying, and I need to tell someone who'll understand." Rita's eyes widened as she saw the number. Is that real? It's real. And Rita, he offered me a job, running his foundation. Rita pulled Emma into a fierce hug. I knew it. I knew tonight was going to change everything. I could feel it. It changed more than you know, Vanessa said quietly. It changed me too. Rita looked at this beautiful rich woman standing in the kitchen like she belonged there. And something in Rita's expression softened. You're the stepdaughter, Vanessa. I am, and I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For all the times I didn't see you, for all the times I looked right through you like you didn't matter. Rita studied her for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She opened her arms and pulled Vanessa into the hug too. 3 women from 3 different worlds, holding each other in a kitchen that smelled like seafood and hope. We're all invisible sometimes, Rita said. But tonight we were all seen, and that's worth more than any amount of money. They stood there together. And for just a moment, the world felt a little less broken, a little more possible, a little closer to what it should have been all along. When they finally pulled apart, Emma realized she was still holding the check. $500,000, a number so large it still didn't feel real. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I need to call my mom, she said.
Use the office, Rita offered. You'll want privacy for this.
Emma walked to Crawford's small office, her legs feeling unsteady. She closed the door and sat in the worn chair behind his desk. For a moment, she just stared at the check, at the number, at the signature that looked old-fashioned and careful at the bottom. Then she dialed her mother's number. Sarah answered on the 3rd ring, her voice weak and breathless. Emma, is everything okay? You usually don't call during your shift. Mom! Emma's voice broke. Mom, something happened. Are you hurt? Did someone... No, I'm fine. Better than fine. Mom, I need you to sit down. I'm already sitting, sweetheart. What's going on? You're scaring me. Emma took a deep breath. Where did she even start? How did you explain that your entire life had changed in the space of a single dinner shift? Do you remember the eviction notice, the hospital bills? Yes. Sarah's voice went small. Emma, if you're calling to tell me we need to start packing, I understand. I've been thinking about Sunset Gardens. Maybe it's time. No, Mom, that's not... Mom, we don't have to worry about the bills anymore. Any of them. Silence on the other end of the line. Then cautiously, what do you mean? A customer tonight. Harrison Westbrook, the billionaire. He gave me a check. Emma looked down at it again, still not quite believing. For $500,000. The silence stretched longer this time. Emma heard her mother's breathing, ragged and uncertain. Emma, Sarah finally said, what did you have to do? The question hit like a fist, because Sarah knew that rich men didn't give poor women $500,000 without expecting something in return. Knew that the world didn't work that way. Knew that money always came with strings. Nothing, Emma said firmly. He asked me to do nothing except stay who I am. Mom, his family tried to bribe me tonight. Tried to get me to lie about him so they could take his company. And I said no. I walked away. And he saw that. He saw me refuse the bribe and he wanted to reward it. She heard her mother start to cry. Soft, hiccuping sobs that turned into coughing. Emma waited, listening to the sounds of her mother's damaged lungs trying to pull in air, thinking about how soon those lungs would get the treatment they needed. The best doctors, the best care. No more choosing between medication and food. My brave girl, Sarah whispered when she could speak again. My brave, foolish, wonderful girl. You could have taken their money. You needed it. I needed my integrity more. Yes. Sarah laughed through her tears. Yes, you did. Just like I taught you. Oh, Emma, I'm so proud of you, I could burst. There's more, Emma said. He offered me a job, running his charitable foundation. $2.5 billion dedicated to helping people like us. People who fall through the cracks. Sarah was crying harder now. A job? Emma, you dropped out of school. You don't have... He said I have something better than a degree. I have compassion and experience and integrity that can't be bought. Emma felt her own tears starting. Mom, I'm going to help people. People just like us. People choosing between rent and medicine. People working 3 jobs and still drowning. I'm going to make sure they don't have to choose anymore. When do you start? Tomorrow. He wants to train me. He only has a few months left. Cancer. He wants to spend what time he has teaching me how to run the foundation properly. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Emma, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll learn everything he teaches you. Promise me you'll honor his faith in you. Promise me you'll remember that money is just a tool. It's what you do with it that matters. I promise, Mom. And promise me one more thing. What? Promise me you'll never forget what it felt like to be us. To be scared and desperate and invisible. Because that's what will make you good at this job. That's what will keep you honest when you're surrounded by all that money. Emma looked down at the check again, at the number that could change everything. And she thought about the bucket catching drips from their ceiling, about the pink eviction notice, about eating ramen for dinner 3 nights in a row because that's all they could afford. I won't forget, she said. I couldn't forget even if I wanted to. It's part of me now, part of who I am. Good, that's good. Sarah coughed again, but it sounded lighter somehow, hopeful. Come home when you can. I want to hear everything, every detail. I will. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. More than all the money in the world. Emma ended the call and sat there in Crawford's office, holding a check that represented more money than most people saw in a lifetime. She thought about how close she'd come to losing everything, how close she'd come to taking Brandon's bribe just to survive another month. And she thought about Harrison Westbrook, dying slowly, spending his last months trying to find one person who couldn't be bought, one person who still valued character over cash, one person who proved that goodness existed somewhere in the world. She'd passed his test without even knowing she was being tested. And now her entire life had changed because she'd made the choice her mother had taught her to make, the choice to be decent even when it cost everything. The office door opened. Vanessa stood there, her makeup still ruined, her red dress looking less glamorous and more human now. Is everything okay? She asked. I just told my mom. Emma wiped her eyes. She cried. I cried. It was a mess. Vanessa smiled. The good kind of mess. Yeah, the good kind. Can I ask you something? Vanessa sat in the chair across from the desk, perching on it like she wasn't quite sure she belonged there. Why did you really say no to the money? The bribe, I mean. You must have been so tempted. Emma thought about how to answer, how to put into words something she barely understood herself. I kept thinking about my mom, she finally said. About how she worked herself sick taking care of me. About how she never complained, never asked for anything, just kept showing up and doing what needed to be done. Because that's what love looks like. And I thought, if I took that money, if I betrayed Mr. Westbrook for cash, what would that say about everything she taught me? What would it say about who I am? Vanessa nodded slowly. I wish I'd thought about that 20 years ago, before I married for money the first time, before I traded my self-respect for security. You stood up tonight, Emma pointed out. You chose right when it mattered. Only because you showed me how. You were so brave, Emma. Braver than I've been my entire life. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. That's what bravery is. Being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. Vanessa leaned forward. Can I tell you something? When I was your age, someone offered me a choice, love or money, and I chose money. I married a man I didn't love because he was rich, and I've regretted it every single day since. You can't change the past. No, but maybe I can change the future. Working with you at the foundation, helping people, actually doing something meaningful with my life. Maybe that's my second chance. My chance to be the person I should have been all along. Emma reached across the desk and took Vanessa's hand. The older woman's fingers were cold and thin, the nails perfectly manicured. Everything about Vanessa was carefully constructed, carefully maintained. But underneath, Emma could feel her shaking. We'll figure it out together, Emma said. You'll teach me how to navigate the world of rich donors and fundraising galas. I'll teach you how to actually help people instead of just writing checks. Deal? Deal. Vanessa squeezed her hand. Thank you, Emma, for not giving up on me, for seeing something worth saving. Everyone's worth saving, Emma said. That's the whole point. They sat there in Crawford's dingy office, two women from completely different worlds, holding hands across a battered desk. Outside, the restaurant was winding down for the night, the last customers paying their bills, the kitchen staff starting to clean, the normal rhythm of service continuing like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. For Emma, for Vanessa, for Harrison, who'd found what he was looking for Rita, who'd witnessed something she'd stopped believing was possible. Everything had changed because one young woman had chosen integrity over survival. Because one dying old man had decided to test character instead of assuming it was dead. Because one broken woman had found the courage to stand up when it mattered most. And tomorrow, Emma would walk into Harrison Westbrook's office and begin learning how to run a foundation dedicated to making sure other people didn't have to make the choices she'd faced tonight, didn't have to choose between medicine and rent, between dignity and survival, between being good and staying alive. Tomorrow, everything would begin. But tonight, sitting in that small office with Vanessa's hand in hers and her mother's voice still echoing in her ears, Emma let herself feel what she'd been too scared to feel before. Hope. Real, honest, terrifying hope that maybe the world wasn't completely broken after all, that maybe good things could still happen to good people, that maybe, just maybe, kindness still mattered in a world that tried to convince you it didn't. She looked down at the check one more time. $500,000. A gift from a stranger who'd become something more. A reward for staying true to who she was, even when everything in her screamed to compromise. And she smiled, because for the first time in longer than she could remember, Emma Carter believed that everything was going to be okay. The morning after the dinner, Emma woke to the sound of voices outside her apartment building. Not the usual sounds of Seattle traffic or neighbors arguing about parking spaces. This was different, sharper, more urgent. The kind of noise that came from too many people crowded into too small a space, all wanting something at once. She rolled out of bed and moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. What she saw made her stomach drop. Reporters, at least a dozen of them. Cameras, microphones, vans with satellite dishes extending toward the gray morning sky like mechanical flowers reaching for sun. They were camped on the sidewalk, drinking coffee from paper cups, checking their phones, waiting for her. Emma's phone buzzed. She turned off the ringer sometime around midnight after the 20th call from a number she didn't recognize. Now the screen showed 37 missed calls, 42 text messages, and a voicemail box that claimed to be full. She scrolled through the messages. Most were from reporters requesting interviews. A few were from numbers she didn't know, people claiming to be lawyers or publicists or concerned citizens. And 3 were from Crawford, each one more desperate than the last, begging her to come back to work so he could issue a statement about the incident at the Sterling Hall. The final message was from a number she did recognize, Rita. "Don't come to the restaurant, it's a zoo here. Call me when you can. Love you." Emma sat on the edge of her sagging couch and tried to understand how her life had become a media circus in the span of 12 hours. She'd gone to work, served soup, made a choice, come home. And now the world was camped outside her door like she'd done something extraordinary instead of just refusing to be bought. Her mother's door opened. Sarah emerged in her faded bathrobe, moving slowly, one hand on the wall for support. But her face looked different this morning, less gray, less strained, like knowing the medical bills were paid had somehow made breathing easier even before the treatment started. "There are people outside," Sarah said. "I know." "Reporters." Emma nodded. Sarah moved to the window and peeked through the curtain. "My God, there must be 20 of them now. What do they want?" "To tell your story, I imagine. Girl refuses bribe from billionaire's family. Girl gets rewarded with fortune. Girl becomes overnight sensation." Sarah let the curtain fall closed. "It's a good story, sweetheart. The kind people need right now. Proof that doing the right thing still matters. I don't want to be a story. I just want to help Mom recover, learn how to run the foundation, try to do some good in the world. I know, but sometimes doing good means people notice. And when they notice, they want to understand. Want to know if you're real or just another scam." Sarah sat beside her daughter. "The world is very cynical, Emma. People have stopped believing that goodness exists. So when they see something that looks like genuine integrity, they need to test it, poke at it, make sure it's real. How do I make them go away? You don't. You face them. You tell the truth. You let them see that you're exactly who you appear to be." Sarah took Emma's hand. "And you remember that their opinion of you doesn't change who you actually are." Before Emma could respond, her phone rang again. This time she recognized the number, Harrison Westbrook. "Hello?" she answered. "Ms. Carter, I apologize for calling so early, but I wanted to warn you before you saw the news. Harrison's voice sounded tired, but determined. My nephew Brandon has gone to the media. He's claiming I'm senile, that you manipulated me, that the whole dinner was a scheme to steal my fortune. Emma's chest tightened. What? It's predictable, really. When people like Brandon lose, they try to rewrite the story so they're the victims. He's claiming you seduced me, convinced me I was being abused by my family, isolated me from my loved ones. The usual playbook for discrediting someone without money or power. But you have the recording, the proof? I do. And we'll use it, but first, I wanted to ask your permission to go public with everything. The recording, the bribe attempt, all of it. Because once we do, your life will never be private again. You'll be scrutinized, investigated. Every mistake you've ever made will be magnified. Every choice questioned. Are you prepared for that? Emma thought about the reporters outside, about the cameras waiting to capture her looking disheveled or scared or guilty, about the story they wanted to tell versus the truth of what had actually happened. What if I say no? She asked. Then we fight this quietly. Through lawyers, through the courts, it'll take years, cost millions. And Brandon will spend that entire time destroying your reputation bit by bit until nobody remembers what really happened. And if I say yes? Then we hold a press conference this afternoon, we play the recording, we let the world hear exactly what kind of man Brandon is and exactly what kind of woman you are. We tell the truth and we trust the truth still matters. Emma looked at her mother. Sarah nodded slowly, a gesture that said, "You're strong enough for this. I believe in you." Okay, Emma said, let's tell the truth. Good. Thomas will pick you and your mother up at noon. We'll get you past the reporters without incident. And Emma, thank you for being brave enough to face this. After she hung up, Emma sat in silence for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to the bathroom, and looked at herself in the mirror, the same face that had stared back at her yesterday. Brown eyes, dark hair that needed washing, skin pale from too many double shifts and not enough sun. Nothing special, nothing extraordinary. Just a waitress who'd said no when saying yes would have been easier. She showered, got dressed in the only professional outfit she owned, a black skirt and white blouse she'd bought at Goodwill for job interviews. Applied minimal makeup because she'd never learned how to do it properly. Pulled her hair into a neat ponytail. When she emerged, Sarah was also dressed. Not in her usual worn house clothes, but in a navy dress Emma hadn't seen her wear in years. The one she'd kept from her nursing days for special occasions. "You're coming?" Emma asked. "Of course I'm coming. You think I'm going to let you face those vultures alone?" Sarah smiled. "Besides, I'm the one who taught you to have integrity. If anyone questions whether you're telling the truth, they can question me too." At exactly noon, a black sedan pulled up outside the building. Thomas Gray emerged, dignified in his gray suit, and approached the crowd of reporters with the calm authority of someone who dealt with far worse in his 35 years of service. "Ms. Carter will not be making any statements at this time," he announced. "She has nothing to hide and will address all questions at the press conference this afternoon. Please allow her to pass." The reporters surged forward anyway, shouting questions. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward the building entrance like weapons. "Emma, is it true you manipulated Harrison Westbrook? How much money did he really give you? Were you having an affair with a dying billionaire?" Thomas positioned himself at the door and held it open. Emma emerged first. Her mother's arm linked through hers. They walked through the gauntlet of reporters with their heads up, neither confirming nor denying anything, just moving forward with quiet dignity while cameras captured every step. The sedan's back door opened. They climbed inside. Thomas got into the driver's seat and pulled away smoothly, leaving the reporters scrambling for their vans to give chase. Inside the car, Emma finally let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking, her heart pounded. But she'd done it. She'd faced them without crumbling. "You did well," a voice said from the front passenger seat. Emma jumped. She hadn't noticed anyone else in the car. A woman turned in her seat, extending her hand. She was maybe 58, with short gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore a navy blazer and minimal jewelry. Everything about her suggested competence and authority. "I'm Dr. Grace Morrison," the woman said. "Harrison's physician and oldest friend. He asked me to ride with you. Thought you might appreciate having another woman present for support." Sarah shook her hand. "Sarah Carter, Emma's mother." "A pleasure." Harrison has told me a great deal about both of you, all of it glowing, I should add. You're his doctor? Emma asked. His oncologist specifically. I've been treating Harrison for 6 months. I can assure you, his mind is perfectly sound. Sharp as ever, actually. The cancer hasn't touched his cognitive function, which makes Brandon's claims of senility particularly offensive. Will you testify to that? Sarah asked. At the press conference? I will. Harrison has given me permission to discuss his medical condition publicly. It's highly unusual, but these are unusual circumstances. Grace turned to face forward as Thomas navigated through Seattle traffic. I should warn you both. This afternoon is going to be difficult. The reporters will be aggressive. They'll try to twist your words, find contradictions, make you look guilty of something, anything. Because a simple story of integrity doesn't sell as well as a scandal. How do we handle that? Emma asked. Tell the truth, simply, directly. Don't embellish, don't get defensive, just state facts and let the recording speak for itself. Grace glanced back. And remember that you've done nothing wrong. The people attacking you are the ones who should be ashamed, not you. The car pulled up to Westbrook Tower, a gleaming structure of glass and steel that dominated the Seattle skyline. Security guards held back another crowd of reporters as Thomas drove into the underground parking garage. They took a private elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Emma found herself in a penthouse office that looked like something from a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. Furniture that probably cost more than her apartment building. Art on the walls that she recognized from her abandoned college art history class. And Harrison, sitting in a leather chair by the window, looking small and tired and somehow peaceful. He stood when they entered, moving slowly but without assistance. Sarah, Emma, thank you for coming. Sarah approached him and, to Emma's surprise, took both his hands in hers. Mr. Westbrook, I wanted to thank you personally for what you've done for my daughter. And for me. We've been drowning for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe. Call me Harrison, please. And I should be thanking you. You raised a remarkable young woman. That doesn't happen by accident. No, Sarah agreed. It happens through sacrifice and love and teaching by example, which is what you're doing now for Emma. Passing on your knowledge. Making sure your legacy helps people instead of just sitting in a bank account. Harrison's eyes grew misty. I wish I'd done that with my own son. Taught him about compassion instead of just business. Maybe he'd still be alive. You can't change the past, Sarah said gently, but you can honor it by doing better going forward. That's what you're doing now. They stood there for a moment, two people who'd both lost so much, finding unexpected understanding in each other's grief. The moment was broken by the door opening again. Vanessa entered, and Emma barely recognized her. Gone was the red Versace dress and heavy makeup. Today, Vanessa wore a simple gray suit and minimal cosmetics. Her hair was pulled back in a professional bun. She looked younger somehow, more real, like she'd stopped trying to be beautiful and had settled for being authentic instead. Emma, Vanessa said warmly, I wasn't sure you'd come. Harrison called, said we were doing a press conference. We are. And I wanted to apologize in advance for what you're about to hear. Brandon has been on every news channel this morning, destroying your reputation, claiming you're a gold digger, a manipulator. Worse. Vanessa's jaw tightened. I should have stopped him years ago. Should have stood up to him when he was just being cruel to waiters and drivers. But I was a coward, and now you're paying the price for my cowardice. You stood up when it mattered, Emma said. That's what counts. Does it? Because right now half of Seattle thinks you're a criminal, and I'm just another victim of my stepfather's delusions. Then we'll show them they're wrong, Harrison said firmly. Vanessa, is everything ready downstairs? The conference room is set up, media credentials verified. We have 23 confirmed outlets, local news, national cable, print journalists, even some international press. This is going to be big, Harrison. Good. Let them all come. Let them all hear. Harrison moved toward the elevator. Shall we? The conference room was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled every seat, notebooks open, recorders running. The air hummed with anticipation and barely suppressed excitement. This was the kind of story journalists dreamed about. Billionaire family intrigue, accusations of manipulation, money and power and scandal. They had no idea they were about to hear something completely different. Harrison took the podium first. Emma, Sarah, Vanessa, Grace, and Thomas stood behind him in a show of solidarity. Emma could feel the weight of dozens of cameras focused on her face, could hear the click and whir of lenses adjusting, could sense the reporters already writing their stories in their heads. "Thank you all for coming," Harrison began. His voice was quiet, but the microphones caught every word. "I'm going to make a brief statement and then we'll take questions. But first, I want to be very clear about something. I am dying. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I have approximately 4 months left to live." A murmur ran through the crowd. Cameras focused tighter. I share this not for sympathy, but for context, because my nephew Brandon has claimed that I'm senile, confused, easily manipulated. And I want you to understand exactly what kind of man makes those claims about his dying uncle. Harrison gestured to Grace. "Dr. Morrison, would you please confirm my medical status?" Grace stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Grace Morrison, oncologist at Seattle Cancer Care. I've been Harrison Westbrook's physician for 6 months. While his physical condition is deteriorating due to cancer, his cognitive function is completely normal. I've administered multiple neurological assessments. There is no evidence of dementia, confusion, or diminished mental capacity. Mr. Westbrook is fully competent to make his own medical and financial decisions." Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras swung to capture Grace's testimony. Harrison continued. "3 nights ago, I hosted a dinner. I invited my nephew Brandon, my stepdaughter Vanessa, and my CFO Richard Sterling. I told them I wanted to test their character before deciding who should inherit my company. And they failed that test spectacularly." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver watch. "This watch contains a recording device. With it, I documented everything that was said at that dinner, including a conspiracy to bribe a young woman into making false statements about my mental health so they could seize control of my assets." The room erupted, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, security guards moving to maintain order. Harrison raised his hand for quiet. "I'm going to play that recording now. I warn you, some of the language is disturbing. But I want you to hear, in their own words, exactly what kind of people we're dealing with." He connected the watch to the sound system, and then Brandon's voice filled the room. Clear, unmistakable, damning. "We need you to make a statement. Just a simple description of Harrison's erratic behavior. We're not asking you to lie. We're asking you to describe what happened from a certain perspective. $4,000, cash, right now. Just a simple statement about what you observed tonight, and the money is yours. You'll regret this. We'll make sure everyone in the city knows you're a liability." Emma watched the reporters' faces change as they listened. Skepticism turning to shock. Cynicism giving way to disgust. The story they'd come here expecting to write, the one about a scheming waitress, evaporating in real time. And then came Emma's voice, quiet but firm. "I can't do it. I won't lie about Mr. Westbrook. Not for $4,000, not for $40,000. My mother taught me that being poor doesn't mean you have to be cheap. That integrity is the one thing nobody can take from you, unless you give it away." The recording ended. The room sat in stunned silence. Harrison looked directly at the cameras. "That young woman is Emma Carter. She served me dinner 3 nights ago. She refused a bribe from my family, even though she desperately needed the money. Even though refusing meant potentially losing her job and her home. She chose integrity over survival. And for that, I offered her a position directing my charitable foundation." He gestured for Emma to step forward. She did, her legs somehow steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Ms. Carter," Harrison said gently, "would you like to say anything?" Emma looked out at the sea of faces, at the cameras capturing every moment, at the reporters who'd been ready to destroy her reputation based on Brandon's lies. "I'm not a hero," she said. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I'm just someone who was raised to believe that you don't betray people who've been kind to you. Mr. Westbrook defended me when I would have been fired. He treated me with respect when others treated me like furniture. When his family tried to buy my cooperation in destroying him, I couldn't do it. Not because I'm especially noble, but because it was wrong." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I think we've created a world where doing the right thing is considered naive, where integrity is seen as a weakness instead of a strength, where we expect everyone to have a price. But my mother taught me differently. She taught me that your word and your character are the only things that truly belong to you. Everything else can be taken away, but who you choose to be, that's yours forever." The room remained quiet. Emma could see some reporters wiping their eyes, could see others nodding. "So, yes, Mr. Westbrook offered me a job and money to help my mother with her medical bills. But those were gifts, not bribes. They came with no strings attached, no demands that I lie or compromise or betray anyone. Just gratitude from a man who'd been looking for proof that goodness still existed somewhere." She looked directly at the camera, and to Brandon Westbrook, who's been telling everyone I'm a gold digger. "I don't want your uncle's money. I want to use it to help people like my mother. People who work hard their entire lives and still end up choosing between medicine and rent. People who deserve better than what our system gives them. That's not gold digging. That's justice." The room erupted in applause. Not polite, professional applause. Real, genuine, from the heart applause. Reporters stood. Cameras captured it all. Harrison stepped back to the microphone. "Are there any questions?" Hands shot up across the room. Harrison pointed to a woman in the front row. "Mr. Westbrook, what do you say to your nephew's claim that Ms. Carter seduced you?" Harrison actually laughed. "I'm 74 years old and dying of cancer. If this remarkable young woman wanted to seduce someone, I doubt she'd choose a skeleton in an expensive suit. No, she was kind to me. She saw me as a human being. And apparently, in Brandon's world, basic human decency is so foreign it must be manipulation." Another reporter. "Ms. Carter, how does it feel to go from waitress to multi-millionaire overnight?" Emma considered this. "Terrifying, honestly. I've never had money. Never even imagined having the kind of money Mr. Westbrook has given me. But I keep thinking about all the other people like me. The ones who are still struggling, still choosing between bills, still working themselves sick because they have no choice. And I think if I can help even a few of them, if I can make their lives a little less desperate, then maybe this whole terrifying experience is worth it." "Dr. Morrison, you've known Harrison for 30 years. In your professional opinion, is he capable of making sound decisions?" Grace didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. Harrison is one of the sharpest people I know. His illness affects his body, not his mind. The idea that he'd be fooled by anyone, let alone a 28-year-old waitress with no experience in manipulation, is absurd." Vanessa stepped forward unexpectedly. "May I say something?" Harrison nodded. "I'm Vanessa Hart, Harrison's stepdaughter. I was at that dinner. I heard my brother plot to bribe Emma, and I sat there in silence, too afraid to speak up, too worried about losing my own inheritance to do the right thing." Her voice shook, but she continued. "But when I saw Emma refuse that money, when I watched her walk away from everything she needed because it was wrong, I remembered who I used to be, before the money, before the marriages, before I sold my integrity piece by piece until there was almost nothing left." She looked directly at a camera. "Emma Carter is not a gold digger. She's not a manipulator. She's just a good person in a world that's forgotten what goodness looks like. And if that makes her newsworthy, then God help us all." The press conference continued for another hour, question after question, each answer reinforcing the same truth. Emma had done nothing wrong. Brandon had lied. Harrison was competent and generous. The recording proved everything. By the time they left the building, the story had already shifted. Online headlines updating in real time. "Recording proves billionaire's nephew tried to bribe waitress." "Family greed exposed." "Harrison Westbrook defends woman who refused bribe." "Waitress hero. Emma Carter chose integrity over 4,000. The narrative had flipped completely. Emma was no longer the villain. She was the hero. The proof that good people still existed. And Brandon, wherever he was hiding, had just learned that lies only worked when no one bothered to check the facts. Back in Harrison's penthouse, Emma collapsed into a chair. Her hands were finally shaking. The adrenaline that had kept her steady through the press conference was wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "You did beautifully," Sarah said, sitting beside her. "I was so proud. I thought I was going to throw up the entire time." "That's called courage, sweetheart. Being terrified and doing it anyway." Grace brought glasses of water. "The worst is over. The story's out there now. The truth is public. Brandon can't twist the narrative anymore." "What happens to him?" Emma asked. Harrison, sitting by his window again, looked out at the city. He'll face consequences, legal ones probably. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss his termination, and I imagine the recording will be of interest to law enforcement. Attempted bribery, conspiracy to commit fraud. Those are serious crimes. And Richard? Richard resigned this morning, returned the money he stole. He'll avoid prison, but his career is over. No one will hire him after this. Harrison turned from the window. Sometimes the punishment isn't what the law does. It's what your own choices cost you. Brandon wanted my money so badly he destroyed his reputation to get it. Now he'll have neither. Vanessa was quiet, standing near the doorway like she wasn't quite sure she belonged in the room yet. Emma noticed. "Vanessa, are you okay?" "I'm processing." Vanessa managed a small smile. "I just told the entire world that I'm a coward who almost let her brother destroy a good person. That's not exactly easy to live with." "But you also told them you changed," Emma pointed out, "that you found your courage when it mattered. That's what people will remember." "I hope so." Vanessa moved into the room finally. "Harrison, if the offer still stands, I'd like to start working at the foundation as soon as possible. I need to do something useful. Need to prove I can be better than I've been." "The offer stands," Harrison said warmly. "In fact, I'd like both of you to start tomorrow. There's a lot to learn, and not much time to learn it." "Tomorrow?" Emma blinked. "But I thought—" "Tomorrow," Harrison repeated firmly. "The sooner you start, the more prepared you'll be when I'm gone. And Emma, I need you to understand something. This job running the foundation, it won't be easy. You'll make difficult decisions, allocate limited resources, choose which programs to fund and which to cut. You'll face criticism from people who think they could do better. And you'll carry the weight of knowing that every choice you make affects real people's lives." "I know," Emma said quietly. "Do you? Because it's one thing to understand that intellectually. It's another to feel the weight of someone's medical bills in your hands and know you can only help a fraction of the people who need it. To look at applications from families choosing between food and medicine and realize you can't save them all." Emma thought about her own mother, about the choice they'd been facing before Harrison intervened, about all the other mothers and daughters and families still facing that choice right now, while she sat in a billionaire's penthouse. "Then I'll save as many as I can," she said, "and I'll do it with integrity, just like you taught me." Harrison smiled. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." They talked late into the afternoon, Harrison describing the foundation's structure, Vanessa taking notes, Sarah asking practical questions about operations and oversight, Grace offering perspective from her years working with underserved patients, and Emma, sitting in that expensive chair, overlooking a city that was still full of people like her mother, people struggling and scared and invisible, made a promise to herself. She would learn everything Harrison could teach her. She would work harder than she'd ever worked in her life. She would make sure his money did what he'd always wanted it to do. She would help the invisible people be seen. Because if a dying billionaire could look at a broke waitress and see someone worth trusting, maybe the world wasn't completely lost after all. Maybe there was still hope. Within 24 hours, the story had gone viral, not just in Seattle, but nationally. The recording of Brandon's bribe attempt played on every major news network. Social media exploded with support for Emma and condemnation for Brandon. Hashtags trended. Had integrity matters. Had Emma Carter hero. Had billionaire greed exposed. The shift in public opinion was so swift and so complete that it felt surreal. Emma's face was everywhere. News websites, magazine covers, morning talk shows playing clips from the press conference, and the message was unanimous. She had done something rare and precious. She had chosen right over easy. But Brandon's fall was equally spectacular. By the second day, 3 major business publications had published exposés about his gambling debts. $700,000 owed to casinos in Vegas and Macau. Another $1.5 million borrowed from private lenders, with interest rates that bordered on predatory. He'd been using company expense accounts to make payments, falsifying reports, living beyond even his considerable means. The board of Westbrook Maritime held an emergency session. Brandon was terminated, his shares bought out at the minimum price allowed by his contract. And the company issued a statement distancing itself from his actions and reaffirming Harrison's leadership. Richard Sterling fared slightly better, but only barely. He resigned, returned the embezzled funds, and retreated into obscurity. His wife, according to news reports, had filed for divorce within 48 hours of the scandal breaking. The money he'd stolen, the money he'd thought would secure his family's future, had destroyed it instead. And Vanessa became an unexpected media darling. Her confession at the press conference, her willingness to admit she'd been complicit through silence, resonated with people, especially women. Especially women who'd made choices they regretted, who'd stayed silent when they should have spoken, who'd compromised themselves for security. She gave one interview to a women's magazine, her first in years, where she talked about something other than fashion and beauty. "I spent 20 years being decorative," she said, "being the pretty stepdaughter, the trophy wife, the woman at charity galas who looked good in photos but contributed nothing of substance. And I told myself that was enough, that being beautiful and pleasant was a kind of value. But it's not. Beauty fades, money runs out. The only thing that lasts is what you do for others." The interviewer asked if she regretted her marriages. "I regret that I married for the wrong reasons," Vanessa answered. "Security instead of love, status instead of partnership. But I can't change the past. I can only try to be better going forward." Meanwhile, Emma tried to navigate her new reality. The check Harrison had given her cleared. $500,000 appeared in her bank account like magic. She stared at the balance for a full minute, unable to process that those numbers were real. The first thing she did was pay off every medical bill. Her mother's, the hospital, the specialists, the medications. Every debt that had been crushing them for years, gone in a single afternoon of phone calls and wire transfers. The second thing she did was hire a pulmonologist, the best one in Seattle. Dr. Patricia Chen reviewed Sarah's case, ran new tests, and recommended a treatment protocol that included new medications and pulmonary rehabilitation. Within a week, Sarah was breathing easier. The constant wheezing faded. The gray tinge to her skin improved. She could walk from the bedroom to the kitchen without having to stop and rest. "I feel like a different person," Sarah told Emma one evening. They were sitting in their small apartment, the one they no longer had to fear losing. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without pain." "We're going to find you a better place to live too," Emma said. "Somewhere without mold in the walls, somewhere safe. Eventually, but not yet." Sarah looked around the shabby apartment with affection. "This place kept us sheltered when we had nothing. I'm not ready to abandon it just because we have options now. Besides, it'll keep us humble, keep us remembering what it was like." Emma understood. Her mother was worried about her, worried that sudden wealth would change her, turn her into someone who forgot where she came from. "I won't forget, Mom, I promise." "I know you won't. But it's easy to lose yourself when everything changes at once. Easy to start thinking you deserve the money, that you're special somehow." Sarah took her daughter's hand. "You're not special, Emma. You're just decent. And decency should be common, not rare. Remember that when people start treating you like you're extraordinary." The next morning, Emma reported to the Westbrook Foundation offices for her first day of training. The foundation occupied an entire floor of a modest building in downtown Seattle. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth, just clean professional office space designed for serious work. Vanessa was already there, standing in what would be their shared workspace. She dressed in a simple black pantsuit, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. The transformation from glamorous socialite to working professional was almost complete. "Ready for this?" Vanessa asked. Terrified," Emma admitted. "Good, me too. I figure if we're both terrified, we can be terrified together." Harrison arrived shortly after, accompanied by a woman Emma had never met. She was maybe 58, with salt and pepper hair cut short and practical. She wore slacks and a cardigan. Reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck. Everything about her suggested competence and no-nonsense efficiency. "Emma, Vanessa, this is Dorothy Gray, Thomas's wife and the former director of the Seattle Women's Shelter Network. She's agreed to come out of retirement to help train you both." Dorothy shook their hands with a firm, warm grip. "Harrison has told me about you both. I'm impressed with what you did at that dinner, Emma. Takes courage to walk away from money when you need it that badly." "Thank you. And Vanessa, I appreciate your honesty at the press conference. Admitting fault publicly is rare. It shows you're serious about changing." I am, Vanessa said. I need to be useful, need to prove I can contribute something beyond just looking pretty at fundraisers. Dorothy smiled. Well, you're in the right place. Running a foundation this size is real work, hard work. You'll be making decisions that affect thousands of lives. Are you both ready for that responsibility? They nodded. Good, then let's begin. The training was intensive. Harrison and Dorothy took turns teaching them different aspects of foundation management: grant applications, budget oversight, program evaluation, donor relations, legal compliance, tax implications. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming. How am I supposed to remember all of this? Emma asked after a particularly dense session on IRS regulations for charitable organizations. You won't, Harrison said. Not at first. That's why you'll have staff, lawyers, accountants, program managers. Your job isn't to know everything. It's to know enough to ask the right questions, to spot when something doesn't feel right, to make decisions guided by compassion but grounded in reality. He pulled up a database on his computer. Look at this. 5,000 applications for medical assistance this quarter alone. 5,000 families in crisis. We can help maybe 300 of them with the budget we've allocated. How do you choose? Emma stared at the screen. Each entry represented a person, a family, someone's mother or father or child facing impossible odds. I don't know. Neither do I. Not really. That's the hardest part of this work. You can't save everyone. You can only save who you can and try not to let the ones you can't help destroy you, Dorothy added. Which is why you need strong boundaries. Need to take care of yourself. Need to remember that you're human, and humans have limits. She looked at Emma seriously. You have a tendency to carry other people's pain. I can see it in you. Your mother's illness, your financial struggles. You've been shouldering burdens that should have been shared. But here, if you try to carry all this pain yourself, you'll break. Do you understand? I think so. I hope so, because we need you to last. Harrison has 4 months, maybe 5. After that, you're on your own. Well, not entirely alone. You'll have Vanessa, you'll have staff, you'll have me if you need advice, but the final decisions will be yours. That's a heavy weight for someone who was serving soup a week ago. Emma felt the reality of it settling over her like a physical thing. In a few months, she would be responsible for billions of dollars, for thousands of lives, for continuing Harrison's legacy. Can I do this? She asked quietly. Harrison answered immediately. Yes, because you're not doing it alone, and because you understand something most people in philanthropy don't. You know what it's like to be on the other side, to be the one filling out those applications, to be desperate and scared and hoping someone will see you as worth saving. That empathy, that understanding, it's more valuable than any business degree. Vanessa had been quiet, taking notes. Now she spoke up. What about me? I don't have Emma's experience. I've never been poor, never struggled. I'm just useless with good intentions. Dorothy turned to her. You're not useless. You're untrained. There's a difference. You have skills, Vanessa. You know how to navigate social situations, how to make people feel valued, how to present a vision in a way that inspires support. Those are donor relations skills. We'll teach you how to apply them to fundraising instead of just attending parties. You really think I can do this? I know you can. Because you want to, because you're willing to learn. Because you finally figured out that contributing something meaningful matters more than being admired. Dorothy smiled. Besides, you and Emma balance each other. She understands the people we're helping. You understand the people we're asking for help. Together, you're a formidable team. They worked late into the evening, reviewing case studies, discussing ethical dilemmas, learning the delicate balance between compassion and fiscal responsibility. By the time they left the office, Emma's head was spinning with information, and her heart was heavy with the weight of what she was taking on. But she also felt something else: purpose. For the first time in her life, her work mattered, not just to pay bills, not just to survive, but to actually make a difference in the world. Vanessa walked with her to the parking garage. That was intense. Yeah. You okay? Emma considered the question. I'm scared, overwhelmed, completely out of my depth, but also excited? Is that weird? Not weird at all. Vanessa unlocked her car. a Mercedes that probably cost more than Emma would make in 5 years at the foundation. Then she paused. I want to tell you something. When I was your age, I had a choice: love or money. There was a man, a teacher actually. He was kind and good and he loved me. But he was poor. And at the same time, there was another man, rich, established, didn't love me but wanted a pretty wife. I chose money. She looked at Emma. I've regretted that choice every single day for 20 years. Wondered what my life would have been if I'd been brave enough to choose love. To choose the person who saw me instead of the one who saw my face. And when I watched you turn down that bribe, watched you choose integrity over survival, I saw the woman I could have been, should have been. And I want you to know, you saved me. Not with money, with example. Emma didn't know what to say. This beautiful broken woman who'd seemed so untouchable at that dinner was now standing in a parking garage, crying and thanking Emma for showing her how to be human again. We're going to be okay, Emma said finally. Both of us. We'll help each other. Yeah, Vanessa agreed. We will. They parted ways. Emma took the bus home, still not comfortable spending money on taxis, even though she could easily afford them now. The apartment was dark when she arrived. Sarah had left a note saying she'd gone to bed early but feeling good. Emma sat on the couch, the same sagging couch she'd slept on for years, and thought about everything that had changed. A week ago, she'd been a waitress facing eviction. Now she was directing a multi-billion-dollar foundation, learning from a dying billionaire, working alongside a woman who was reinventing herself at 42, preparing to help thousands of people avoid the desperation she'd lived with for so long. It was terrifying and exhilarating and impossible and real all at once. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rita. Saw you on the news. You did good, kid. Real good. Proud of you. Emma smiled. Rita had been the first person to tell her she mattered, the first person to see her as more than just a server. And now, in a strange way, Rita's faith in her was being validated. She texted back, "Thank you for teaching me that I deserve to be seen, for being the first person to treat me like I mattered." The response came quickly. "You always mattered, the world just wasn't paying attention. Now it is. Make them keep paying attention, make them see all of us." Emma promised herself she would. She'd make sure the foundation helped not just the people filling out applications, but the people like Rita who'd been invisible for decades. The workers, the caregivers, the ones who held everything together while the world looked right through them. She'd make sure they were seen, because if a waitress could go from serving soup to running a foundation, anything was possible. And maybe, just maybe, the world was starting to remember that character mattered more than cash. Time, Harrison Westbrook had learned, was the cruelest teacher. It waited until you finally understood the lessons, then took away your chance to use them. The months that followed the press conference passed with the strange dual quality of feeling both endless and impossibly brief. Each day seemed to last forever, filled with training sessions and foundation work and the slow, steady education of two women who'd never imagined themselves capable of such responsibility. But the weeks blurred together. One moment it was August, the foundation's offices still new and unfamiliar. The next, it was October, and Harrison was moving slower, speaking quieter, his body visibly failing even as his mind remained sharp. Every Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon, Emma and Vanessa joined Harrison in his penthouse for tea. It became ritual, sacred, the one constant in a season of constant change. The first Tuesday in August, Harrison taught them about reading financial statements. Not the numbers themselves, but what the numbers meant. How to spot when a program director was padding expenses. How to recognize when overhead costs were consuming too much of the budget. How to tell the difference between necessary administrative expenses and waste. "Money is just a tool," he said, pouring tea from a silver pot that had belonged to his wife. His hands shook slightly with the effort, but he insisted on maintaining the ritual. The afternoon light slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the tea golden in their cups. But it's a powerful tool. Used right, it saves lives. Used wrong, it props up bureaucracy while people suffer. Your job is to make sure every dollar actually helps someone. Emma watched the way his fingers trembled on the teapot handle. Watched the concentration it took for him to complete such a simple task. He was deteriorating, week by week, day by day, the cancer eating through him like acid through paper. What if we make the wrong choice? Emma asked. What if we fund something that fails? Then you learn from it. Adjust. Try again. Harrison set down the pot carefully, as if it weighed far more than it actually did. Emma, I've made hundreds of wrong choices in my business career. Ventures that collapsed, partnerships that soured, investments that tanked. The difference between success and failure isn't avoiding mistakes. It's having the courage to admit them and change course. Don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid to keep failing the same way. By the second Tuesday in August, he'd started using oxygen during their sessions. The clear tubes running to his nose made him look fragile in a way that broke Emma's heart, but his mind remained sharp. His lessons continued. You'll want to help everyone, he said, pausing between words to catch his breath. The oxygen hissed softly in the background, a constant reminder of mortality. Every application will break your heart. Every story will make you want to empty the entire treasury. Single mothers, sick children, elderly people choosing between medication and food. But you can't help them all. Resources are finite. Your job is to help as many people as possible, which means sometimes letting individuals down to serve the greater good. That's the burden of this work, learning to live with the people you couldn't save. Emma struggled with this lesson more than any other. Late at night, she'd review applications they'd rejected, families with medical bills they couldn't pay, stories that mirrored her own so closely it hurt to read them. A woman with COPD just like her mother, a daughter working 3 jobs to keep her family afloat, a child who needed surgery the insurance company had denied. She'd lie awake wondering if she'd made the right call, if the family they'd chosen to help deserved it more than the ones they'd turned away. If there was a moral calculus that made these decisions bearable, how did you learn to live with it? She asked Harrison during their third Tuesday session in September. The leaves outside his windows were starting to turn. Autumn coming early this year. The people you couldn't help. How do you sleep at night? He was quiet for a long moment. The oxygen hissed. Rain pattered against the windows. The city moved below them, oblivious to the weight of the conversation happening in this penthouse. I didn't. Not really. Not for years. Harrison's voice was barely above a whisper now. Every person I couldn't help haunts me. Their faces, their names, the desperation in their voices when they called, begging for just a little more time, a little more money, a little more help. But I had to accept that haunting is the price of doing this work. You carry their stories, you let them hurt, but you don't let the hurt paralyze you. You use it to make sure you're allocating resources wisely, that you're actually helping, not just making yourself feel better. Harrison looked at her with eyes that held decades of regret. The families you can't help, Emma. They'll stay with you forever. But if you let that guilt stop you from helping anyone, then you failed everyone. Better to save some and carry the weight of those you couldn't than to save none and carry the weight of your own cowardice. The fourth Tuesday in September, Vanessa asked about donor relations. She'd been working on a fundraising campaign for the Foundation's scholarship program and was nervous about approaching Seattle's wealthy elite, people she'd known socially but never asked for anything meaningful. How do I ask rich people for money without feeling like I'm begging? She asked, her voice uncertain. Harrison smiled, though the expression looked painful now. His face had grown gaunt over the past weeks, the skin stretched tight over prominent cheekbones, his body consuming itself to feed the cancer's insatiable hunger. You're not begging. You're offering them something priceless, the chance to matter. He paused to adjust his oxygen. Most wealthy people I know are desperately unhappy. They have everything money can buy and nothing money can't. Private jets and empty marriages, mansions and estranged children. They're surrounded by people who want their wealth but not them. You're offering them meaning, purpose, the opportunity to be remembered for more than their bank balance. But they don't know me anymore, not the real me. Exactly. And that's your strength. Before, when you were just another socialite at parties, you were selling yourself, trying to be liked, trying to maintain status. Now you're selling a vision, a mission that's bigger than any individual. People respond to that. They want to be part of something meaningful. Give them that opportunity and they'll surprise you. Vanessa nodded, taking notes in the leather journal Harrison had given her. But Emma noticed her hands were shaking. Noticed the way she kept glancing at Harrison like she was trying to memorize him, like she knew their time was running out and wanted to capture every detail before it was too late. By the first Tuesday in October, Harrison was using a walker. The cane no longer provided enough support. His hands shook constantly now, not just when pouring tea. Every movement required visible effort. Every word cost him. But his eyes remained clear, focused, determined to pass on every scrap of knowledge before time ran out. They were discussing long-term sustainability when Emma, unable to hold back any longer, asked the question that had been haunting her for weeks. "Tell me about Jonathan," she said gently. Harrison's hands stilled on the walker handles. The room fell silent except for the steady hiss of oxygen and the soft patter of rain against glass. For a moment, Emma thought she'd overstepped, that this was a wound too deep to touch. Then Harrison nodded slowly and began to speak. Jonathan was brilliant, gifted pianist, could have been a concert performer if he'd wanted. His teacher said he had something special, a connection to the music that went beyond technique. Harrison's voice grew thick with emotion. But I pushed him into business. Told him music was a hobby, not a career. Told him real men built empires, not played pretty songs. Told him he had a responsibility to the family legacy. He paused, gathering strength. He tried. God, he tried so hard to be what I wanted. Went to Wharton Business School even though he hated every minute. Joined the company, worked 60-hour weeks, smiled at board meetings, and pretended he was happy. And all the while he was dying inside. Depression, anxiety, the crushing weight of trying to be someone he wasn't. Emma felt tears building but didn't interrupt. This was confession, penance, the unburdening of a dying man who'd carried this weight alone for too long. "What happened?" Vanessa asked softly, her own eyes wet. "I gave him an ultimatum." Harrison's voice broke. "Either commit fully to the business or leave the company entirely. I thought I was teaching him about responsibility, about seeing things through, about not being a quitter. But what I was really doing was telling him he wasn't good enough as himself, that his worth was conditional on meeting my expectations, that I loved what he could become more than who he actually was." Harrison wiped his eyes with a trembling hand. "He left my office that day. Didn't say anything. Just walked out. I thought he'd gone home to think about it, to come to his senses. Instead, he drove to the Westbrook Maritime building, took the elevator to the roof, and jumped." The silence that followed was profound, sacred, the kind of silence that holds grief too big for words. "I found his journal later," Harrison continued, each word clearly causing him pain, full of entries about how much he disappointed me, how he'd failed to live up to the Westbrook name, how maybe I'd be better off without him dragging down the legacy, how he couldn't stand seeing the disappointment in my eyes every time he walked into a room. The last entry, written the morning he died, said he was setting me free from his inadequacy. Harrison looked at them both, his face wet with tears. "I killed my son by valuing achievement over love, by making him feel that who he was wasn't enough, by teaching him that worth was measured in stock prices and quarterly earnings instead of joy and kindness and the courage to be yourself. And I can't fix it. I can't take back those words. I can't tell him that I was wrong, that he mattered more than any business, that I would have traded everything to just see him happy, to hear him play piano one more time." Emma crossed the room and knelt beside his walker, taking his frail hands in hers. They were cold despite the warm room, light as bird bones. "You're telling us. You're making sure we don't make the same mistakes. That has to count for something." "Does it? How many lives does it take to balance the one I destroyed? How many families saved equals one son lost?" "It's not about balance," Vanessa said, joining them, her hand on Harrison's shoulder. "It's about learning, growing, becoming better. You can't undo what happened to Jonathan, but you can make sure his death meant something, that it taught you what mattered, that it changed how you see the world." Harrison nodded slowly, exhaustion written across every line of his face. "That's why this matters so much, the foundation. Training you both. Making sure my money helps people instead of destroying them. It's the only redemption I have left. The only way to prove that Jonathan's death wasn't completely meaningless, that some good can come from terrible things." The second Tuesday in October, Harrison didn't come down to the office. Emma got the call from Thomas at 3 in the afternoon. Harrison was too weak to rise from bed, too exhausted to make the trip downstairs. But he still wanted the lesson, still insisted on teaching what he could while he could. They went to him, found him propped up on pillows in a hospital bed that had been moved into his bedroom. Oxygen running full time now. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor. His breathing was labored, each breath a visible struggle. His body a battlefield where cancer was clearly winning. But when he saw them enter, his eyes lit up with something that might have been joy, or might have been relief that he wasn't alone. "You came," he whispered. "Of course we came," Emma said, pulling a chair close to his bedside. "We have a standing appointment." Vanessa set up a simple tea service on the bedside table. No elaborate ritual this time. Just hot water and tea bags and the pretense that this was any normal Tuesday, that everything was fine, that they had all the time in the world. "Succession planning," Harrison said, his voice barely audible. Each word seemed to cost him something precious. "When I'm gone, the board will try to influence you, tell you what the foundation should fund, try to steer resources toward their pet projects, their alma maters, their favorite hospitals. You have to resist. The foundation belongs to the people it serves, not to the people who want to control it." "How do we resist?" Vanessa asked, her voice tight with the effort of not crying. "By remembering why you're here, by staying close to the communities you're helping, by never letting yourselves become so comfortable that you forget what desperation feels like." He looked at Emma, his eyes still sharp despite everything else failing. "That's your strength. You know what it's like to be invisible, to be discounted, to have people make decisions about your life without ever asking what you need. Don't lose that. Don't become the kind of people we're fighting against." They spent the next hour going over organizational charts, succession plans, the legal structures that would protect the foundation from outside interference. Harrison's voice grew weaker as they worked, but he pushed through, determined to pass on everything he knew before it was too late. When they finally stood to leave, Harrison reached out and caught Emma's hand. His grip was weak but insistent. "Will you stay, just for a minute?" Vanessa excused herself quietly. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, holding this dying man's hand, feeling how light he'd become, how fragile, like tissue paper, like wind could carry him away. "I'm scared," Harrison admitted, his voice so quiet she had to lean close to hear. "Not of dying, of being forgotten, of my life meaning nothing in the end, of being remembered only for the mistakes, for Jonathan, for the people I hurt, building my empire." "You won't be forgotten," Emma promised, her own voice breaking. "Every person we help will be a testament to you. Every family that doesn't have to choose between medicine and food. Every mother who can breathe without pain. Every child who gets educated because of the scholarship fund. You'll live on through all of them. Will I? Or will they just remember the foundation and forget the man who started it? Will they know that I did this trying to make amends? Trying to prove I wasn't completely worthless?" Emma thought about this carefully, choosing her words with the weight they deserved. "Does it matter? If the work continues, if people are helped, does it matter whether they know your name?" Harrison smiled weakly. "No, I suppose it doesn't. I just wanted to be more than just a name on a building. Wanted to be a father, a husband, a friend, and I failed at all of those things." "You're a teacher, a mentor, the person who saw potential in me when no one else did, the person who gave Vanessa a second chance when she thought it was too late. That counts for something." "Does it count for enough?" Emma squeezed his hand gently. "It counts for everything." By November, Harrison was on full hospice care. Dr. Grace Morrison stopped by daily, adjusting medications, ensuring he was comfortable. The goal now wasn't healing, just minimizing suffering, making the inevitable as gentle as possible. Sarah came too, using her nursing skills to help with the practical aspects of dying, checking vitals, repositioning to prevent bed sores, monitoring fluid intake, the quiet, unglamorous work of caring for someone whose body was shutting down one system at a time. Emma watched her mother work with something approaching awe. This was Sarah's gift, not just medical knowledge, but the ability to maintain dignity in undignified circumstances. To treat a dying billionaire with the same gentle competence she'd shown to homeless addicts and uninsured teenagers throughout her nursing career. "This is what you did," Harrison said to Sarah one afternoon, his voice so weak Emma had to lean in to hear. "For 30 years, helping people through the hardest moments of their lives." "It was an honor," Sarah said simply, adjusting his pillows with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved with the certainty that came from 3 decades of this work. Most people think nursing is about medical knowledge, but really, it's about bearing witness, being present for someone when they're vulnerable and scared, treating them with dignity when their body is betraying them. Harrison watched her work with something like wonder in his failing eyes. "Emma is lucky to have you as a mother. I'm the lucky one. She's a better person than I ever was. Braver, more principled. She chose integrity when I might have chosen survival. She learned that from someone, from watching you sacrifice everything to keep her safe and loved." Harrison's breathing was labored, each word an effort he could barely afford. "You know what I regret most? Not being present for my own son. I gave him everything except the one thing that mattered. My time, my attention, my unconditional acceptance of who he actually was instead of who I wanted him to be." Sarah sat on the edge of his bed, taking his hand in hers with the easy familiarity of someone who'd held countless hands at countless bedsides. "You can't change the past, but you're changing the future. Emma will help thousands of people because you believed in her. Families won't be destroyed by medical debt. Children will get educated. Mothers will keep their homes. That's a legacy worth having." Is it enough? It has to be, because it's all any of us get. The chance to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. The opportunity to help someone else climb out of the hole we fell into. The hope that our mistakes teach someone else how to avoid them. Harrison closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his sunken cheek. "I hope you're right. I'm a nurse who worked 30 years in emergency medicine. I've held the hands of saints and sinners as they died. And you know what I learned? In the end, we're all just people trying to matter, trying to leave the world a little better than we found it. You've done that, Harrison. Let yourself believe it." The last Tuesday in November arrived with cold rain and gray skies that seemed to press down on Seattle like grief itself. Emma and Vanessa came to the penthouse at 4, as always. But this time, walking through the door, they both knew it would be the last time. Harrison was in his study, propped up in his chair by the window. Thomas had positioned him so he could see Puget Sound one final time. The water was dark and choppy, whitecaps visible even from this height, the kind of November storm that Harrison had loved in his younger days. The oxygen mask covered his nose and mouth now. His chest rose and fell with visible effort, each breath a battle. His skin had taken on a translucent quality, like parchment held up to light. Death wasn't coming anymore. It was already here, sitting patient in the corner, waiting for the final moment. "I can't pour today," Harrison said, his voice muffled by the mask. Thomas removed it briefly so he could speak. "Emma, would you?" Emma poured the tea with hands that wanted to shake but refused to. The ritual had become muscle memory over these months. The precise temperature, the right amount in each cup, the slice of lemon Harrison preferred. She moved through the motions while her mind screamed that this was wrong, that he should be pouring, that this should last forever, that there should be more time. But there was never enough time. That was the cruel truth about mortality. "I need to tell you both something," Harrison said once they were settled. Emma and Vanessa in chairs pulled close to his. "While I still can." They sat, waited. The only sounds were the rain against the windows and Harrison's labored breathing, and the soft hiss of oxygen flowing through tubes. "I've lived 74 years, built an empire, made billions, lost everyone I loved along the way." He looked at them both, his eyes still sharp despite everything else failing. "And you know what I've learned? That the only moments that mattered were the ones where I connected with another human being. Really connected, saw them, let them see me. Everything else, all the money and power and success, it was just noise, meaningless, a distraction from what actually counts." He paused, gathering what little strength remained. Thomas helped him drink water through a straw. Then Harrison continued, each word clearly costing him. "This moment right now, having tea with 2 women I've come to love like daughters, this matters. The dinner where Emma showed me that integrity still exists. That mattered. Vanessa finding her courage and standing up when it would have been easier to stay silent. That mattered. Sarah teaching her daughter to value character over cash even when they had nothing. That mattered. All the rest of it, the deals and the acquisitions and the quarterly earnings reports, none of that matters. None of it lasts beyond the grave. He reached out with trembling hands and took theirs. His skin was cold despite the warm room, his grip weak but determined. You two are my legacy. Not the money, not the company, you, the work you'll do, the people you'll help, the proof that goodness can still win even in a world designed to crush it. When I'm gone, when people ask what Harrison Westbrook left behind, I want the answer to be simple. He left behind women who changed the world. He left behind hope. We won't let you down, Emma promised, her voice breaking despite her best efforts. I know you won't, but I need you to promise me something else, something more important. Anything. Promise me you'll take care of each other, that you'll be the family neither of you had growing up, that you'll remember that you're not alone in this, that when it gets hard, when you're overwhelmed, when you want to quit, you'll lean on each other. Promise me you'll be sisters in everything but blood. Vanessa was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it or wipe away the tears. I promise, I swear it. And promise me you'll never forget what it felt like to be invisible, to be discounted, to need help and wonder if anyone would see you. Because that empathy, that understanding, it's what will keep you honest when you're surrounded by wealth and power. When board members try to flatter you, and donors try to influence you, and people treat you like you're special because you control billions of dollars, remember that you're not special. You're just human beings who happen to be given resources. Use them well. We promise, they said together, their voices mingling with the sound of rain and labored breathing. Harrison closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his sunken cheek, catching the gray light from the window. Good, that's good. You can go now. Let an old man rest. But they didn't go. Couldn't go. They sat with him for another hour, holding his hands, watching the rain, being present the way Sarah had taught them, being witness to a life ending and a legacy beginning, saying goodbye without saying the words. When they finally stood to leave, Emma leaned down and kissed his forehead. His skin was cool and papery beneath her lips. Thank you for everything, for seeing me, for believing in me, for teaching me what matters. Harrison's eyes opened one last time. No, he whispered, so quietly she almost missed it. Thank you for being exactly who you are, for proving that I didn't completely fail, for giving my life meaning at the end when I thought I had none left to give. 3 days later, at 2:17 in the morning on the last day of November, Emma's phone rang in the darkness. She'd been half awake, unable to sleep, as if some part of her knew what was coming. She answered before the second ring. He's gone. Thomas's voice was steady, but Emma could hear the grief underneath, hear 35 years of friendship ending in those two words. Peacefully, in his sleep. Grace was with him. He wasn't alone. Emma sat in her dark bedroom and let herself cry. Not dramatic sobs, but quiet tears that fell like rain on her cheeks. Tears for a man she'd known only 4 months, but who'd changed her entire life. A man who'd seen value in her when she couldn't see it in herself. A man who'd chosen to spend his final months teaching instead of wallowing in bitterness about everything he'd lost. She called Vanessa. They cried together over the phone. Two women who'd found a father figure in the most unlikely place and lost him far too soon. Then Emma called her mother, who came in her bathrobe and held her while she grieved. Sarah didn't say much, just held her daughter and rocked her slowly, the way she'd done when Emma was small and afraid of thunderstorms. Because some pain was too big for words. Some loss could only be weathered through presence and touch. The funeral was held on a gray December morning. The church was one of those old Seattle institutions with stained glass windows and wooden pews worn smooth by generations of worshipers. It was packed beyond capacity, people standing in the aisles and the back. Politicians filled the front rows, business leaders, philanthropists, the kind of people who attended funerals to be seen attending them. But Emma looked to the back of the church. That's where it mattered. Rita stood there in her best navy dress, the one she'd probably owned for 20 years. Beside her, the servers from the Sterling Hall, kitchen staff, janitors, security guards. the invisible workers who'd read about Harrison defending a waitress and recognized one of their own being seen. Behind them, standing room only, were people Emma didn't recognize until she read the memorial program. They were people the foundation had helped. Medical bills paid, rent covered, children's medications provided. They'd driven hours to be here, scraped together gas money they couldn't afford. Come because someone had finally seen them. Dorothy Gray gave the first eulogy, speaking about Harrison's transformation in his final months. Grace Morrison spoke about 30 years of friendship. Then Vanessa stood, walking to the podium in a simple black dress, her face free of heavy makeup. "My stepfather was not a perfect man," Vanessa began, her voice steady despite the tears. "He was hard, demanding, sometimes cruel. He destroyed his son by valuing achievement over love. But in his final months, he did something extraordinary. He looked at his failures and decided to learn from them, to be better, to prove it's never too late to become who you should have been." She looked at Emma. "He saw potential in people others overlooked. He believed in second chances. He taught me that beauty fades, but character lasts forever. And he left us with a mission, to help the invisible people be seen." Then Emma stood, walked to the podium, looked out at hundreds of faces. "I knew Harrison Westbrook for 4 months," she said. "I was a waitress, poor, invisible. But Harrison saw me, and when his family tried to bribe me, he trusted I'd choose integrity. That trust changed my life." Her voice grew stronger. "He taught me that having money isn't the same as having worth, that desperation doesn't justify cruelty, that the measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable. And he gave me the tools to help people avoid the choices I faced." She looked at the casket. "Thank you, Harrison, for seeing me, for believing in me. I promise I'll make you proud." The church erupted in applause. Not polite, real, standing ovation, Rita leading it from the back. They buried him at Lakeview Cemetery next to Margaret and Jonathan. Just the inner circle. Rain fell as his casket was lowered into the ground. "He's with them now," Grace said quietly. "Maybe he can finally tell Jonathan he's sorry." They each placed a flower. Emma's was a simple daisy, Vanessa's a white rose. Then they walked away through the rain, leaving Harrison to rest with the family he'd failed in life, but would love forever in whatever came after. The will reading happened a week later in Mrs. Eleanor Hartman's office, a tasteful space that smelled of leather and old paper. She'd been Harrison's attorney for 40 years, had drafted his first corporate contracts, had witnessed his rise and his transformation. Now she presided over the distribution of everything he'd built. Emma sat between Vanessa and her mother, trying to calm her racing heart. Around the conference table sat Thomas, Grace, Dorothy, and to her surprise, Rita, who looked as confused as Emma felt about being included. "Why am I here?" Rita whispered. "I barely knew him." "Harrison had his reasons," Mrs. Hartman said with a knowing smile. "You'll see." She opened the sealed document with ceremony, breaking the wax seal that had kept it secure. Then she began to read in her clear, professional voice. "I, Harrison Westbrook, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The preliminary language took several minutes. Legal formalities, revocations of previous wills, appointment of executors. Then came the bequests. "To my nephew Brandon Westbrook, I leave the sum of $1 and no more. This nominal bequest is intentional, ensuring he cannot claim I forgot him in my final days. On the contrary, I remember him perfectly. I remember his greed, his cruelty, his willingness to destroy others for personal gain. This single dollar represents what his character is worth. May he learn from his failures what success could never teach him." Emma felt grim satisfaction at the justice, even if it came too late to save Harrison from his nephew's betrayal. "To Richard Sterling, former CFO of Westbrook Maritime, I leave nothing. He has already taken more than enough through embezzlement and dishonesty. Let his conscience be payment enough. To my stepdaughter, Vanessa Hart." Mrs. Hartman paused, looking at Vanessa with something like approval in her eyes. "I leave an annual income of $50,000 for life, contingent upon her continued meaningful work with the Westbrook Legacy Foundation. This is not charity, but compensation for labor, recognizing that she has found her purpose in service. Additionally, I leave her my complete art collection, currently valued at $8 million, with the request that she use it to establish a permanent exhibit titled Women Who Persevered, celebrating women throughout history who overcame adversity to make meaningful contributions to society. Vanessa's hands flew to her mouth, her shoulders shaking with sobs. He trusted me, even after everything. Even after I sat there in silence while Brandon plotted against him. He still believed I could change, that I was worth saving. He believed in second chances, Mrs. Hartman said gently, her professional demeanor softening. For everyone, including himself. To Thomas Gray, my loyal friend and assistant of 35 years, she continued, I leave $12 million, the penthouse apartment where we spent so many hours in companionable silence, and my eternal gratitude for your unwavering support through the hardest years of my life. You were there when Margaret died, when Jonathan jumped, when the cancer diagnosis came. You never judged, never abandoned me. You were the truest friend a difficult man could ask for. Thomas removed his glasses with shaking hands, wiping his eyes with the handkerchief he'd carried in his pocket for decades. He was a difficult man, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Demanding, exacting, sometimes impossible. But he was also my friend, the best friend I ever had, and I'd serve him again in a heartbeat. To Dr. Grace Morrison, Mrs. Hartman read, I leave $5 million to be used exclusively for pancreatic cancer research in the name of Margaret Westbrook. You couldn't save my wife, Grace, and you couldn't save me. But perhaps this money can save someone else's husband or father or friend. Perhaps some family won't have to watch their loved one waste away the way I did. Thank you for your honesty, your friendship, and for being there at the end when I needed someone who understood. Grace nodded, tears streaming down her face. He was one of the good ones. In the end, when it mattered most, that's what I'll remember. To Sarah Carter, the attorney continued, I leave full medical coverage for life through the Westbrook Foundation Health Program, ensuring she'll never again have to choose between breathing and paying bills. Additionally, I leave her $200,000 in cash and an apartment in the same building where Emma will be living, so mother and daughter can remain close. Your daughter saved me from despair, Sarah. She showed me that integrity still exists in a world I thought had forgotten it. The least I can do is ensure you're cared for. Thank you for teaching Emma that character matters more than comfort. That lesson changed everything. Sarah pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed. He barely knew me. We spoke maybe a dozen times. He knew enough, Emma whispered, taking her mother's hand. He saw what you'd sacrificed, what you'd taught me, what you'd endured. He honored that. Honored. To Dorothy Gray, Mrs. Hartman read, I leave $500,000 for your continued work mentoring nonprofit leaders. The world needs more people with your integrity and fewer with my former ruthlessness. Thank you for being willing to teach two lost women how to find their way. Thank you for giving them the tools to succeed where I failed. Dorothy smiled through her tears. He was a good man at the end. That's what matters. Not what you were, but what you became before the curtain fell. To Rita Chen, Mrs. Hartman's voice grew softer. I leave $100,000 in cash and a specific request. I ask that you use this money to establish the Jonathan Westbrook Memorial Scholarship for the children and grandchildren of service workers. Name it after my son, who never got the chance to pursue his dreams because I crushed them. Let other young people study music or art or poetry or anything that calls to their hearts instead of what economic necessity or parental pressure demands. Let them be who they are instead of who the world insists they should be. Rita was sobbing openly now, her hands covering her face, her whole body shaking. I don't understand. Why me? I'm nobody. Just an old waitress. Mrs. Hartman pulled out a separate envelope. He wrote you a personal note. He asked that I read it aloud. She opened it carefully and began. Rita, you don't know me, but I know you. Emma told me about you. Told me you worked in restaurants for 25 years, always invisible, always overlooked, always passed over for younger, prettier servers when promotions came around. Told me how you taught her that invisible doesn't mean worthless, that people like you hold the world together, while people like me take credit for your labor. I want you to know that you matter, that your kindness mattered, that your wisdom mattered, that the way you treated Emma when she needed someone to see her changed absolutely everything. This scholarship is my way of honoring you and every other invisible worker who makes society function while being taken for granted. Thank you for being there. Thank you for caring. Thank you for teaching Emma to see value in herself when the world told her she was worthless. With profound respect and gratitude, Harrison Westbrook. Rita couldn't speak, just held the letter against her chest and wept for the recognition she'd waited 25 years to receive. And finally, Mrs. Hartman said, her voice carrying weight now, to Emma Carter, I leave the following assets and responsibilities. The room fell completely silent. 51% controlling shares of Westbrook Maritime, currently valued at $3.5 billion, granting her majority control of all corporate decisions. All assets in complete oversight of the Westbrook Legacy Foundation, currently holding $2.7 billion in endowment. The Sterling Hall restaurant in its entirety, with the legal requirement that all current staff be retained at wages no less than $25 per hour with full benefits, and one personal item of irreplaceable sentimental value. Mrs. Hartman stood and walked around the conference table. She handed Emma a small velvet box, worn at the edges from years of handling. Emma opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled in faded silk, was the silver pocket watch, the one that had recorded everything, the one that had exposed the truth, the one that had changed her entire life. There's a note, Mrs. Hartman said. Harrison asked that I read it aloud so everyone could hear his final words to you. She unfolded the paper, and Emma recognized Harrison's careful handwriting. Each letter formed with the precision of someone who knew these might be his last written words. Emma, Mrs. Hartman read, her professional voice finally breaking with emotion. This watch was a gift from my wife Margaret on our wedding day, 45 years ago. She told me it would help me remember what time is for. Not for making money or building empires or crushing competitors, but for connecting with people, for being present in moments that matter, for letting people see you and daring to see them in return. I forgot that lesson. I spent decades treating time as just another resource to exploit, another commodity to leverage for profit, and I lost everything that mattered. My wife died feeling alone. My son jumped from a building because he thought disappointing me was worse than dying. I built an empire and lost my soul. But you never learned the lesson wrong in the first place. You've always known that people matter more than profit, that integrity is worth more than security, that being seen and truly seeing others is what makes us human. Keep this watch. Let it remind you that truth always prevails in the end, even when lies seem more profitable in the moment. Let it remind you that character is the only currency that follows you beyond the grave. Let it remind you that you are not just managing money, but stewarding hope for desperate people who've run out of options. You are the daughter I wish I'd raised, Emma. The daughter I failed to give Jonathan permission to become. You are living proof that I didn't completely fail as a human being, that some good came from my wasted years, that redemption is possible even at the end. Use my fortune wisely. Help the invisible people be seen. Give families the choices I denied my own son. Prove that goodness can still win in a world designed to crush it. That's all I ask. That's my redemption. That's my peace. With more love than I knew I was still capable of feeling, Harrison. Emma held the watch, feeling its weight. Not just the physical weight of silver and mechanics, but the weight of $6 billion in responsibility. The weight of thousands of desperate families counting on her wisdom. The weight of proving that a billionaire's faith in a waitress hadn't been spectacularly misplaced. Around the table, everyone was crying. Even Mrs. Hartman had set down the will and removed her glasses to wipe her eyes. He loved you, Vanessa said, her voice raw with emotion. Like a daughter. The way he should have loved Jonathan but didn't know how. The way he learned to love by watching you refuse to be anything other than yourself. I loved him too, Emma whispered. I just wish I told him before it was too late. He knew, Sarah said firmly, her nurse's practicality cutting through the emotion. The way you cared for him at the end. The way you sat through those Tuesday lessons even when he could barely speak. The way you promised to continue his work, that was love. He knew. 1 year later, Emma stood at the foundation office windows looking out at Seattle. On her desk, the pocket watch sat in a place of honor. The numbers told the story. 5,000 families helped, 23 million in medical bills paid, 1,200 families saved from eviction, 3,000 people given mental health support, 20 service workers' children on full college scholarships. But the real impact couldn't be measured in numbers. It was the mother breathing without pain, the father who didn't have to choose between his child's medicine and rent, the invisible people who'd been seen. Emma's phone buzzed. A new application. Maria Gonzalez, 39, single mother of 2, son with leukemia, facing bankruptcy. Emma approved it. $200,000 for treatment, 6 months rent assistance. Then she called Maria directly, something she did for every approved case. Ms. Gonzalez, this is Emma Carter from the Westbrook Legacy Foundation. Your application has been approved. Silence, then the sound of hope returning after being dead too long. How can I thank you? Take care of your son. And someday pay it forward. After hanging up, Emma sat quietly. One family saved, hundreds more waiting. She couldn't save them all, but she'd save who she could. A knock. Vanessa entered. The breakfast went well. We raised $2 million. That evening, they gathered at the Sterling Hall. Emma had transformed it as Harrison requested. Staff earning living wages, full benefits. Rita as general manager. They sat at table 1. Emma, Vanessa, Sarah, Grace, Dorothy, Rita. 6 women united by a dead man's dream. To Harrison, Emma said, raising her glass. To Harrison, they echoed. Emma looked around the table. Her found family. Her proof that legacy wasn't about money, but about lives touched. People helped. Character honored. She pulled out the pocket watch, opened it, saw the recording device that had changed everything. I miss him, she said. Me too, Vanessa agreed. He gave me my life back. As they prepared to leave, Emma's phone buzzed. Another application. Another desperate family. Another chance to help someone be seen. Shall we get back to work? She asked. They stood together, 6 women who'd been invisible in different ways. 6 women changing the world, one desperate family at a time. Together, Vanessa said. Always, Rita agreed. They walked into the rain, ready to continue the work, ready to prove Harrison's faith hadn't been misplaced. Because legacy wasn't about the money you left behind. It was about the lives you touched, the people you helped, the proof that you mattered. Harrison Westbrook had mattered, and through them, he would continue to matter long after his name was forgotten. That was enough. That was everything.